Chapter 1. In June, on an island in Indonesia, the sun was shining brightly. There were a few antique Tang-style buildings hidden in the lush green forest. The bronze-colored beams and pillars, the greenish-brown roof tiles, the tall flying eaves, and the tricolored ceramic mythological beasts that guarded the house stood upright on the roof. Everything was so mysterious and solemn. This was where the underhand sect's main hall was located. In the last courtyard of this building, there was a small stone building covered in black paint. There was a horizontal board that was as red as blood on the door, and the words Punishment Hall were carved neatly on it. The underhand sect's main hall, the torture hall, was responsible for all sorts of punishments within the sect. All the disciples were terrified of the torture hall. In the torture hall's main hall, there was a memorial tablet of heaven, earth, master, and the underhand sect's ancestors. Under these memorial tablets, there were 4 large chairs. The underhand sect's 4 great elders, disciplinary elder, commander, martial elder, and sect protector, were sitting upright on the chairs. On both sides of the hall, there were hundreds of underhand sect's disciples standing solemnly. Some of them were tall, some were short, some were fat, some were thin, some were beautiful, some were ugly, some were long and some were short. Some of them wore suits, some of them bared their chests, some of them wore long gowns, and some of them looked no different from the hooligans on the streets. Their attire was also very strange. All the disciples stood solemnly in the hall, not daring to slack off in the slightest. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly, for fear that they would disturb the somber atmosphere of the disciplinary hall and attract the stern rebuke of the disciplinary elder. Wu Wang was wearing a green long robe. He solemnly cupped his fist and bowed to the 4 elders who held the real power in the sect. Elders, Shengguanyi, who violated the sect's rules, has been captured alive. Please punish him according to the sect's rules. The underhand sect's 4 elders' faces were gloomy. The torture master looked at Wu Wang, waved his left hand and coughed, "Substitute sect leader, where is Shengguanyi?" Wu Wang smiled faintly, turned around and waved his hand. Wu Qi, together with a few other young men who were as vigorous as wolves, carried a middle-aged man who was tied up tightly with a thin rope made of cow tendons and walked in with big strides. The middle-aged man, who was tied up like a rice dumpling, had 2 walnuts stuffed into his mouth. He glared at Wu Wang and kept making muffled noises, but couldn't say a single word. After throwing Shengguanyi onto the floor of the punishment court, Wu Qi smilingly pinched Shengguanyi's mouth a few times, then took out the walnut from his mouth. Although Shengguanyi was tied up like a dumpling, his body was still as agile as a monkey. As soon as Wu Qi took out the walnut from his mouth, he leaped up in a flash and landed in the middle of the punishment chamber. Staring at Wu Wang angrily, Shengguanyi roared crazily, "Wu Wang, how dare you ask your men to catch me?" Wu Wang let out a creepy smile. Wu Qi kicked Shengguanyi's leg, forcing him to kneel down on the floor. Pressing on Shengguanyi's shoulder, Wu Qi smiled gently and said, "Uncle Shengguan, my teacher is the substitute sect leader now." Shengguanyi struggled crazily, he shouted fiercely, "Bullshit substitute sect leader, what bullshit substitute sect leader? Wu Wang, I don't believe you, I don't believe you. My father is the substitute sect leader, the position of sect leader should be mine, it's mine." Wu Wang smiled and took a few steps back. The torture master looked at Wu Wang who was smiling, then suddenly stomped his feet and shouted angrily, "How dare you? Shengguanyi, take a good look at this place." Shengguanyi's body trembled, he rolled his eyes and looked at the torture master, who had a stern face, and said with a sneer, "Where is this place?" "The punishment hall." "What did I, Shengguanyi, do to deserve to be punished by the punishment hall?" "Elders, what did I, Shengguanyi, do to deserve to be punished like this?" The 4 elders furrowed their brows at the same time. They glanced at Lu Xiaobai, who was standing behind Wu Wang, with long hair and a skinny face like a ghost. Letting out a long sigh, the disciplinary elder shouted in a deep voice, "Shengguanyi, 3 months ago, were you the one who led your disciples to rob 17 families?" Straightening his neck, Shengguanyi sneered, "Yes, so what? Our underhand sect, don't we do this kind of shady business?" Wu Wang smiled, he put his hands behind his back and didn't say anything. Lu Xiaobai waved his folding fan and took a few steps forward. He sneered and said, "Yes, our underhand sect does that kind of shady business." Letting out a long sigh, Lu Xiaobai said with a compassionate tone, "But, as the saying goes, robbers have their own rules. Our underhand sect's founders set the rules. Even if we have to die of poverty, we can't rob good people." The folding fan heavily knocked on Shen Guanye's shoulder. Lu Xiaobai pointed his finger at Shen Guanyi and scolded, "But Shen Guanyi, he robbed 17 wealthy families in a row, 6 of them had their family heirlooms stolen by him. And those 6 families are all good people who do good deeds and do good deeds." The punishment hall was silent, everyone was looking at Lu Xiaobai and Wu Wang. Shen Guanye's body trembled, he wanted to jump up, but Wu Qi pressed his hand on Shen Guanye's shoulder and forcefully held him down. Dozens of explosive sounds were heard, Shen Guanye's body trembled, the ropes that were tied around his body were broken. Both of Shen Guanye's arms were like 2 agile snakes, they came out from under Wu Qi's armpits and pressed towards Wu Qi's lower abdomen. Wu Qi let out a few chuckles. Both of his palms left a few afterimages in the air, and both of his arms twisted as if they were boneless. Without making a sound, he moved towards Shen Guanyi. A muffled sound was heard, Wu Qi stood still, but Shen Guanyi was sent rolling on the ground by the force of the palm, blood was dripping down from the corner of his mouth. Looking at Wu Qi in shock, Shen Guanyi shouted, "Little bastard, you've only joined the sect for less than 3 years, how can your palm strength be stronger than mine?" Wu Qi chased after him, and with a kick, he sent Shen Guanyi flying up into the air. Wu Qi said with a smile, "Uncle Master Shenguan, as the son of the former sect leader, you disobeyed the rules of the sect and attacked someone in the punishment hall, you will be punished 3 times more. Why don't you just bow down and admit your guilt?" Wu Wang coughed. Lu Xiaobai immediately turned her head around and stared at the 4 elders. The 4 elders clenched their fists on the armrests of the big chair, the armrests made of red sandalwood were crushed into pieces. The disciplinary elder took a deep breath, stood up and shouted angrily, "Come on, Shen Guanyi violated the rules of the sect first, then attacked someone in the punishment hall, this is an unforgivable crime. Considering that he is the only son of the former sect leader, Shenguan Tianzheng, his cultivation will be destroyed, and he will be imprisoned in the sect for the rest of his life." Lu Xiaobai applauded and cheered. All the disciples of the underhand sect who were watching the punishment in the punishment hall applauded and cheered. The disciplinary elder is fair in giving out rewards and punishments, all the disciples are convinced. Shen Guanyi stared at all his fellow disciples in the punishment hall, he shouted angrily, You. The disciplinary elder stomped his feet and shouted angrily, "Where are the disciplinary disciples?" Wu Qi replied and leapt towards Shen Guanyi. His palms were like swallows flying through the forest, they were all over Shen Guanye's body. Shen Guanyi barely managed to block a few rounds of attacks from Wu Qi with his palms, he kept spitting out a mouthful of blood. In the end, he was exhausted, and Wu Qi landed 18 consecutive palms on his dantian. The yin energy from Wu Qi's palms penetrated through Shen Guanye's dantian, it shattered the internal energy that he had been cultivating for more than 10 years. After destroying all of Shen Guanye's cultivation, Wu Qi's face still had a gentle, kind, and even admiring smile. "Martial uncle, you've been through a lot, it's time for you to have a good rest." Without giving Shen Guanyi any chance to scream, a thin black blade appeared in between Wu Qi's fingers, it quickly sliced through Shen Guanye's wrists, elbows, and other joints like a whirlwind. As the blade pierced through his flesh, the blade was still slightly trembling. In just a blink of an eye, a few important tendons in Shen Guanye's arms were cut off. Shen Guanyi screamed in pain, a large amount of blood was oozing out from both his arms. His internal energy was destroyed, and the tendons in both his arms were broken. Shen Guanyi was now a cripple. Wu Qi continued with a smile, "This time you've broken the sect's rules, I'm sure it wasn't your intention. I'm sure it was an unintentional mistake. But no matter what, the sect's rules are the sect's rules. Our underhand sect has existed for a long time, this rule cannot be broken." With a sigh, Wu Qi looked at Shen Guanyi and said in a serious tone, don't worry, I'll take care of all your food and clothing for the rest of your life. Looking at Wu Qi and laughing bitterly, Shen Guanyi nodded his head and said, good, good, you're just a little bastard who's only worth $100, you're very good. Shen Guanyi spat out a mouthful of blood towards Wu Qi, then he turned around and gazed at the 4 sect elders, whose faces had turned pale with anger. He sneered 3 times. After cursing a few times with a ferocious expression, Shen Guanyi finally looked at Wu Wang. 7 years ago, my father used up the last bit of heaven-repairing healing ointment left in the sect storage to heal your broken tendons. But today, your disciple has destroyed my cultivation. Wu Wang, I, Shen Guanyi, will fight you to the death. Wu Wang bowed to Shen Guanyi with a solemn expression, and said in a serious tone, Senior Shen Guan, you've broken the sect's rules, this is the punishment you deserve. Wu Wang will always remember the kindness that Master has shown to me, Wu Wang will always remember it. From now on, senior disciple can retire peacefully in the underhand sect, Wu Wang will take care of all your expenses. Looking at Wu Qi with approval, Wu Wang waved his hand and said, Wu Qi, you're being filial, but senior disciple Shen Guan is still a senior in the sect, how can I spend your junior's money? From now on, senior disciple Shen Guan will retire in my private residence, all of you have to take good care of him. Hastily, Wu Qi bowed and answered with utmost respect. Glancing at all the disciples in the punishment court, Wu Wang shouted out in a stern voice, all of you, remember this, whoever dares to violate the rules of the underhand sect, Shen Guanyi is the perfect example. Wu Qi put away the small blade between his fingers, then signaled the disciples behind him to drag Shen Guanyi out. Shen Guanyi struggled with all his strength, he let out a miserable laugh and said, Wu Wang, Lu Xiaobai, Wu Qi, I will never let you go. Ha ha ha, you're dead meat, you're just courting death. And you 4 old fools, I will never let you go, I, Shen Guanyi, will wipe out your entire family. While laughing, Shen Guanyi was forcefully dragged out of the punishment court. Shen Guanyi's miserable cry could still be heard from afar. All of you just wait, I'll make you pay one by one. While Shen Guanyi was struggling crazily in his sleeve, a paper crane made of yellow paper suddenly burst into flames and turned into ashes. Wu Wang stuck out his chest and looked at all the disciples in the punishment court, he said calmly, disciples from the wind court, go and find out where Shen Guanyi had taken all the stolen items. I don't care about the other items, but the 6 family heirlooms must be retrieved. Glancing at the 4 elders, Wu Wang said calmly, the rules of the underhand sect can't be broken in our generation. The 4 elders looked at each other and sighed at the same time. The guard elder tremblingly took out a palm-sized gilded box from a secret pocket in his chest and handed it over with a serious expression. Substitute sect master, the token of the underhand sect master is here. Other than Shen Guanyi, no one has any objections to the sect master's position. The 4 elders, Chi, cupped his fist toward Wu Wang and said, substitute sect master, please officially take over the underhand sect. All the disciples in the punishment court knelt down at the same time. Substitute sect master, please officially take over the underhand sect. Wu Wang did not act bashful at all. He took the box in his hands and nodded firmly. Lu Xiaobai and Wu Qi looked at each other and smiled at the same time. Chapter 2. The Lost Mountain, Machu Picchu. On the tourist route to Machu Picchu, the local police set up checkpoints to block off the road. The reason was that Machu Picchu was undergoing an important archaeological survey, so no one was allowed to get close. At the edge of Machu Picchu city, 2,000 meters above sea level, 3 underhand sect disciples with mini submachine guns on their waists were vigilantly watching their surroundings. Wu Qi sat on the roof of a house that did not have a roof sealed off 10 meters away. He held a beer can and laughed as he admired the scenery around him. The scenery of the mountains around Machu Picchu was extremely beautiful. Green mountains were stacked on top of each other, and the morning mist was rising. It was as if the morning wind had created a long white trail halfway up the mountain. It was like a fairyland that attracted people's imaginations. Wu Qi gulped down a mouthful of beer, pinched the beer can flat, and threw it away forcefully. He subconsciously touched the secret compartment on his belt. The token of the underhand sect leader was lying quietly in the secret compartment, not moving at all. According to the underhand sect's rules, the sect leader's token must be worn by the sect leader at all times. However, Wu Wang was not a person who abided by the rules. He, who was currently leading a group of elite disciples to survey Machu Picchu city, did not want to have another burden on him. He gave all the important items on him to Wu Qi, who was not familiar with the archaeological survey. He himself led a group of elite disciples and went into battle. Right now, they were running around in circles in the ruins of Machu Picchu. 200 meters away, in an abandoned temple, Wu Wang, who was only wearing a small pair of underwear, straightened his back, coughed loudly, and spat out a mouthful of phlegm. It had just rained heavily, so there was a lot of dust in the temple. The rain and dust mixed into a dirty mud. Wu Wang's entire body was wrapped up like a mud monkey. Throwing away the exquisite ultrasonic detector in his hand, Wu Wang took a few steps back and suddenly leaped forward. He heavily slammed his palm on an inconspicuous carved brick in the corner of the temple. The detector had already detected something strange in the temple. With the experience and eyesight of the underhand sect's elite disciples, they easily found out that this brick was the key to control some of the mechanisms in the temple. The entire city of Machu Picchu suddenly shook. Following Wu Wang's powerful attack, the carved brick slowly sank into the wall. On the east side of the temple, there was a hall without a roof. Hundreds of beautifully carved bricks silently slid away and quickly sank into the ground, revealing an entrance that could fit 3 people walking side by side. Wu Qi grabbed a sharkskin scabbard next to him. It had a brass hilt and a golden handle. The scabbard was embedded with countless big and small gems. This was a treasured sword that an elder-level expert from 3 generations ago of the underhand sect had casually taken out from an ancient tomb under Tiger Hill's sword pool. The 2 words, Dragon Abyss, were carved on the body of the sword, but he didn't know if it was the legendary Dragon Abyss sword forged by O Yezi. It was unknown if it was the legendary Dragon Abyss sword forged by O Yezi, but this Dragon Abyss sword was extremely sharp. As the only disciple of Wu Wang and the eldest disciple of the underhand sect, Wu Qi naturally had the right to use it. Dozens of young men from the underhand sect's Greedy Wolf group followed closely behind Wu Qi with all kinds of weapons in their hands. After Wu Wang joined the underhand sect, the Greedy Wolf group was an elite force that had been specially trained by taking in orphans from all over the past few years. Under Wu Qi's leadership, the Greedy Wolf group played an important role in turning the tide of the battle when Wu Wang defeated Shengguan Yi and took over the underhand sect. With the Dragon Abyss sword in his hand, Wu Qi took the lead and walked into the tunnel. After taking a few steps forward, Wu Wang, who had just exhausted his energy, turned around and dragged Lu Xiaobai, who had an unwilling look on his face, to chase after them. Lu Xiaobai, who was wearing a long robe, looked like a noble young master who was about to attend a banquet. He struggled and shouted, "I'm a clean freak, I'm a clean freak. Big brother, sect leader, Uncle Wu, I hate digging holes. Don't pull me, okay?" Without saying a word, Wu Qi grabbed a piece of mud from the dark ground that was filled with 2 to 3 inches thick mud, then casually smeared it on Lu Xiaobai's face. Lu Xiaobai's body froze. He stared blankly at the dirty water dripping down his face. His body started twitching violently. "Wu Qi! You ungrateful bastard! Have you forgotten who was the one who brought you out of Africa 4 years ago?" Lu Xiaobai's fan almost touched Wu Qi's nose. Wu Qi's mouth twitched and he shrugged. "Last year in Amsterdam, who was the one who had no money to pay for a woman and asked me to save his life? You bought me for $100. That day, I paid you $3,800. Even with the inflation of the past 2 years, I've already returned your favor." Looking at the dumbfounded Lu Xiaobai, Wu Qi said mockingly, "As the chief disciple of the underhand sect, White Paper Fan, you actually had your wallet stolen by those hooligans from the Netherlands. If the ancestors of the past were to see you, even if you were a ghost in the middle of the night, you should be strangled to death." Wu Wang laughed crazily. Lu Xiaobai's mouth twitched for a while. He suddenly stomped his feet and threw away his fan. He took off his long gown and led the group forward with his head hung low. Lu Xiaobai, who had a monstrously high IQ and a body that was even thinner than little sister Lin's, in just a few short years, he had mastered all the ancient books of the underhand sect's hidden weapons and mechanisms, and he had even innovated and developed them. As long as he led the way, there was basically no mechanism that could stop Wu Wang, Wu Qi, and the others. Wu Wang had an extremely strong organizational ability and cohesiveness. Wu Qi had extremely strong martial arts talent and fighting ability. However, the one who truly inherited the underhand sect's ancestral cooking skills was still Lu Xiaobai. While grumbling, Lu Xiaobai led the group down the tunnel and gradually went deeper into the mountain. There were dozens of hidden weapons and mechanisms with shocking destructive power set up in the tunnel, but they were all easily broken by Lu Xiaobai. I hate this kind of behavior that insults my intelligence. Lu Xiaobai grumbled as he broke the mechanisms on the road, intruding into someone's ancestral grave, using violence to break in. There is no intelligence at all, no intelligence at all. No one cared about Lu Xiaobai's self-reproach. Wu Wang brought a few underhand sect disciples and set up searchlights and ventilation ducts along the way. Wu Qi led the elites of the greedy wolf group and carefully guarded the surroundings. Inside this kind of ancient ruins, there might be some strange things. Just last year, they had stumbled upon a mummy that could move around in an underground tomb somewhere in the King's Valley of the King in Egypt. Wu Qi brought over 30 experts from Greedy Wolf Group and engaged in a bitter fight, and finally managed to tear the mummy into pieces. The Inca ruins were no less mysterious than Egypt's, so Wu Qi was prepared to draw his sword at any time. Fortunately, nothing out of the ordinary happened here. After Lu Xiaobai broke through 64 traps, the group successfully arrived in front of a large metal door at the end of the tunnel. This was a door that was clearly made of gold and silver, with countless mysterious patterns carved on it. The rectangular door was 12 meters tall and 3 meters wide. Under the light of the searchlights, the door shone with a mysterious gold and silver light. Lu Xiaobai moved closer to the door and used a needle to poke the door. 6 gold and 4 silver, extremely pure. This time, as long as we can cut these 2 doors and bring them back, it will be worth the price. These few years in the underhand sect had trained Lu Xiaobai's amazing appreciation skills. With just a light poke of the needle, he could see the material ratio of the folding door. It was almost a pure gold and silver alloy, 60% gold and 40% silver. This door was so huge, even if it was only the thickness of a normal door, it was still a shocking amount of wealth. Wu Wang took a palm-sized gold medallion in the shape of a multi-pointed sun from one of the doormen, full of the charm of South American Incan culture. He looked at the door and said with a smile, "I'm curious, what's behind the door if the cost is so high?" Wu Qi looked at the door and suddenly pulled out his sword. A ray of water rushed out from the scabbard and pierced the door with a piercing sound. Wu Qi's talent was amazing. After training under Wu Wang for 4 years, his inner energy was almost comparable to the 4 elders of the sect. The Dragon Abyss sword was an ancient treasured sword. The cyan body of the sword was as smooth as water. Under the surge of internal energy, the tip of the sword spat out a 3-inch long sword aura. It tore through the air and pierced towards the door. A loud sound was heard, the door suddenly flashed with lightning. A lightning ray as thick as an arm shot out from the door and fiercely hit the Dragon Abyss sword. Wu Qi's arm felt as if it was struck by lightning, the sleeve on his right hand turned into ashes on the spot. His whole body flashed with thin lightning, and he was blasted far away. His body was in extreme pain, every cell in his body was penetrated by the high-voltage electricity. If it wasn't for Wu Qi's strong inner energy supporting him, he would have been killed by the electricity. Lu Xiaobai, who was standing by the door, was so scared that he jumped back more than 2 meters. He exclaimed, "What the hell? Those uncivilized ancient Incas, they invented the high-voltage electric fence." Wu Wang held the gold medal in his hand tightly, looked at the door and shook his head. "Bullshit high-voltage electricity grid, if it was really that thing, the first person to die would be you." Turning around to look at Wu Qi, Wu Wang asked anxiously, "Wu Qi, are you alright?" Taking a deep breath, carefully circulating a breath of inner energy throughout his body. Wu Qi clenched his teeth and stood up. He shook his head. I'm fine, I just used up 70% of my inner energy. Looking at the dragon abyss sword in his hand, as expected of an ancient sword, after being hit by the lightning ray, the sword did not show any signs of damage. Instead, a mysterious blue color appeared in the green water light, the same color as the lightning ray. Stretching his body, Wu Qi clenched his teeth and said, Master, we have to use that gold metal. This door, I'm afraid, is as strange as that mummy. Wu Wang frowned. He held the gold medal in his hand tightly, and carefully approached the door. This gold medal was accidentally obtained by a disciple of the Underhand sect from a private museum in South America a few months ago. With the sharp eyes of the Underhand sect's disciple, this gold medal, whether it was the material, the patterns, or the writing on it, they were all extremely valuable. Therefore, this relic from the museum was successfully brought to the Underhand sect. After the painstaking research of a few ancient history and ancient writing experts, and following the clues left on the gold medal, Wu Wang and the others arrived here. The clues on the gold medal were indeed not a lie. Not to mention anything else, just the fact that this door could automatically emit high-voltage electricity to defend itself was worth everyone's effort. The thing behind this door was even more worth looking forward to. Carefully, very carefully protecting his right palm, Wu Wang stuffed the gold medal into the middle of a smiling sun mask in the middle of the door. As soon as the gold medal was inserted, the door suddenly emitted a strong light. With a leap, Wu Wang retreated 30 meters back. That heavy door had already swayed to both sides soundlessly, revealing a huge space filled with a strange radiance behind it. Wu Wang took a deep breath. We're rich this time. Wu Qi's eyes widened, staring blankly at the unimaginable thing inside. Lu Xiaobai stretched her neck, subconsciously muttering to herself, magnetic levitation. Gods. Immortals. It can't be that ridiculous, right? Before she finished speaking, 3 green lights suddenly shot out from behind the tunnel. With a few soft sounds, the green lights swept in all directions. Other than Wu Wang, Wu Qi, and Lu Xiaobai, all the other disciples of the Underhand sect were dead. Dozens of blood pillars flew, dozens of heads rolled on the ground. Chapter 3. Everything happened so suddenly that before the 3 of them could see clearly what the green light was, 3 beams of light had already flown away. The heads that were chopped off by the green light were still rolling in the air, and before they could even land on the ground, a light suddenly flashed in the tunnel behind them, followed by a deafening thunder. The 3 of them trembled, and their clothes were torn to shreds by a tremendous force. They spat out mouthfuls of blood and rolled into the huge stone chamber at the end of the tunnel. With his sharp eyes, Wu Wang barely saw that what attacked them just now was a lightning bolt as thick as an arm. The lightning bolt was greenish-red in color, about 2 to 3 meters long, and its power was comparable to a small artillery shell. The 3 of them were hit by the lightning bolt, and without any ability to resist, they were blasted into the stone chamber. With great difficulty, Wu Wang propped himself up and shouted, "Who is it?" A light laugh came from afar, and a clear and gentle voice was heard. Everyone says that in the home of immortals, the jade lotus and fire jujube are truly praiseworthy. The jade liquid nourishes the white sprouts, the dragon tiger core glows with purple clouds. Accompanied by the Taoist words, a young Taoist wearing a purple Taoist robe, embroidered with the Tai Chi 8 trigrams on his chest and back, and the sleeves of his robe were covered with luxurious patterns. This young Taoist was closely followed by 8 middle-aged Taoists in green robes, and all of them were looking at the sky with an insufferably arrogant air. It was as if in their eyes, Wu Wang, Lu Xiaobai, and Wu Qi were just 3 ants that could be easily killed, and were not worth their attention. Wu Qi's eyes focused, and he suddenly jumped up, pulled out the dragon abyss sword, and stabbed towards the heart of the purple-robed Taoist. Even a grain of rice can shine brilliantly. The handsome face of the purple-robed Taoist was filled with a disdainful sneer. He casually pointed his finger, and a sparkling white light shot out from his sleeve, clashing with the sword beam that Wu Qi had activated with all his strength. A crisp sound rang out, and the white light shone brightly. The Dragon Abyss sword was shattered, and Wu Qi felt as if he was struck by lightning. His whole body trembled, and he was sent flying dozens of meters away by the white light. His head hit the ground, and he could no longer move. Wu Qi felt half of his body go numb. The white light was only 1 meter long, and it was surrounded by a dense cold air. When the Dragon Abyss sword collided with the white light, it was like colliding with a mountain. The white light wasn't damaged at all, but Wu Qi almost broke all the bones in his body. The innate qi in his body was shattered by the white light, and his limbs and bones seemed to be broken. Wu Qi fell to the ground, and he couldn't even move his fingers. Accompanied by an ear-piercing evil laughter, Shangguanyi brought a group of disciples from the underhand sect and strode into the room. Looking at Shangguanye's ruddy complexion, and the fact that his arms were able to move freely, it was obvious that his cultivation base that was destroyed by Wu Qi had completely recovered, and the meridians that were severed were completely healed as well. Wu Qi was stunned. He was the one who had executed Shangguanyi, so he knew how severe his strength was. Shangguanyi, who was supposed to be lying on the bed, had actually recovered his cultivation base, and the injuries on his meridians were healed as well. This was simply impossible. Shangguanyi fiercely glared at Wu Qi, then pointed his finger at Wu Qi and shouted, "Little bastard, I told you, all of you will die." A few of Shangguanye's trusted disciples walked up to Wu Qi with a hideous smile on their faces, and started beating him up. Wu Qi held his head with both of his hands, and let them beat him up. Without anyone noticing, he had already taken out the underhand sect leader's badge from the secret compartment on his belt. The muscles on his waist, thighs, and calves were moving like flowing water, and he had quietly placed the sect leader's badge into his boots, hiding it under his feet. It was almost an instinct. When Wu Qi saw Shangguanyi walking into the stone room, he started doing this. When Shangguanye's trusted disciples were beating him up, the sect leader's badge had been safely hidden by Wu Qi inside his boots. As expected, after Shangguanyi roared at Wu Qi, he immediately walked up to Wu Wang, and started searching Wu Wang's body. Wu Wang stared at the priest in purple coldly, and said with a sneer, "Shangguanyi, are you blind? Look at Lao Tzu, he only has a pair of underwear on him, why are you still searching? What else can I hide on my body?" Shangguanyi grabbed Wu Wang's neck and roared, "Sect leader's badge, where is the sect leader's badge?" Wu Wang let out a strange laugh, then he shook his head and said, "Sect leader's badge. I hid it in the vault of a Swiss bank." Shangguanyi was stunned, he stared at Wu Wang and roared, "According to the underhand sect's rules, the sect leader's badge must always be with the sect leader, this is a rule passed down by our ancestral master. Why did you hide it in the vault?" Wu Wang rolled his eyes, stared at Shangguanyi coldly, and said with a strange laugh, "If Lao Tzu wants to, why don't you bite Lao Tzu's bird?" The priest in purple waved his sleeve, and with a loud slap, Wu Wang was slapped across the face. A large amount of blood sprayed out from Wu Wang's face. The purple-robed Taoist's palm strike had almost shattered Wu Wang's face. A large piece of flesh was sent flying, and blood gushed out. Unruly commoners of the secular world are really unreasonable. The priest looked at Wu Wang from the corner of his eyes and mocked him coldly, "You're still so arrogant even in the face of death, humph." Wu Wang spat out a mouthful of blood, looked at the priest in purple and sneered, "Who are you? Unruly commoners of the secular world? Hee, we're all just commoners, what kind of person are you?" The purple-robed Taoist acted as if he was too lazy to talk to Wu Wang. He turned around and said to Shangguanyi in a cold voice, "Since they've worked so hard to find this grand universal teleportation formation, there's no need to torture them too much. Just give them a good death." Shangguanyi responded respectfully, then casually threw Wu Wang to the ground, then heavily stomped on Wu Wang's lower abdomen, breaking the inner energy that Wu Wang had cultivated for years. He pointed at the priest in purple and sneered, "I'll let you know before you die, this is the young Taoist Miao Yuan from Qingqing Mountain, the last disciple of the old Taoist Zijizi from Qingqing Mountain." The purple-robed Taoist reservedly put his hands behind his back and put on the posture of an otherworldly master. However, his eyes were filled with ecstasy as he stared at the mysterious thing that could not be explained by common sense in the huge stone room in the belly of the mountain. Wu Wang, Lu Xiaobai, and Wu Qi also looked at the strange things inside the mountain at the same time. When the metal door was opened just now, the three of them realized that these things inside the mountain couldn't be explained with common sense. Based on their knowledge and experience, they knew that they had discovered something extraordinary. However, everything happened so suddenly, and Shen Guanyi actually led Miao Yuan here to kill them. Before Wu Qi and the others could properly study the mysteries of this place, they were already in a desperate situation. Facing the godly power of Miao Yuan and the other priests, they were powerless to resist. No one knew if it was natural or man-made, but in the mountain below Machu Picchu, a spherical space with a diameter of about 1 kilometer had been excavated by someone. This huge space was perfectly round, and the mountain walls were as smooth as a mirror. It was hard to imagine that if this spherical space was excavated by someone, what kind of amazing power would be needed to do it. On the smooth mountain walls, tens of thousands of thumb-sized pearls and gemstones were inlaid. All kinds of gemstones were shining brightly, forming a complicated star chart on the mountain walls. If one stared at this star chart for a long time, they would feel that the star chart was faintly rotating. It was really incredible. Under the illumination of the magnificent light emitted by the astrological map, an inexplicable and incomprehensible object was floating in midair. 360 pieces of white mutton fat jade were floating above everyone's head, forming a spherical stone formation with a diameter of about 300 meters. These 12 feet long, 6 feet wide, and 1 foot and 2 inches thick pieces of jade were engraved with countless complicated talismans. Between the talismans, there were also thousands of fist-sized, glittering objects inlaid in the vital areas. These huge jade pieces were floating in mid-air, not moving at all. From time to time, a ray of light as thick as an arm would shoot out from the jade pieces and enter the jade pieces nearby. Surrounded by the jade pieces, there was a round platform made of gold. The platform was also engraved with countless talismans, and on top of it, there were 360 shiny stones the size of human heads that looked like gemstones. An extremely ancient aura was faintly spreading out from the golden platform. Just by looking at the golden platform, everyone felt like they were looking at the ancient history slowly flowing in front of them. While being beaten, Wu Qi suddenly burst into a loud laughter and said, "Master, we have found something amazing." Shen Guanyi strode forward and heavily stomped on Wu Qi's head. He sneered and said, "It was Lao Tzu who found this thing, it has nothing to do with you." Before he could finish his words, Miao Yuan let out a cold humph. Shen Guanyi quickly corrected himself and said, "It was Miao Yuan Daoist who found the clues to this grand void teleportation formation. All of you are just pawns in his hands, he asked you to be his pawns and help him clear the traps and hidden weapons in front of the door." Nodding and bowing to Miao Yuan, Shen Guanyi said with a smile, "Everything is under Miao Yuan's control, all of you can die in peace." Hearing Shen Guanyi's flattering words, Miao Yuan let out a faint smile and shook his head proudly. "Forget it, they are just a bunch of ordinary people, I don't want to argue with them, it will only bring shame to my identity and face." Shen Guanyi, let them die knowing the truth. Shen Guanyi flattered him again, then proudly explained to Wu Wang, Lu Xiaobai, and Wu Qi what had happened. In fact, before Wu Wang joined the underhand sect, Shen Guanyi had already joined Miao Yuan's side and became his henchman. Last time when Shen Guanyi stole the family heirlooms of dozens of rich and powerful families, it was under Miao Yuan's order. Even in their wildest dreams, these rich and powerful families would never have imagined that their family heirlooms, to cultivators like Miao Yuan, were rare treasures that were hard to come by. That's right, Miao Yuan was a legendary cultivator, the kind of cultivator who pursued immortality and ascended to become an immortal. When Shen Guanyi and Wu Wang fought for the position of the underhand sect leader, he was defeated. He immediately activated the summoning crane talisman given to him by Lord Daoist Miao Yuan, asking for his help. Miao Yuan had used the Daoist sect's spirit pills to restore his cultivation base and heal the injuries on his tendons. Kicking Wu Wang a few times, Shang Guanyi sneered and said, if it wasn't for Miao Yuan's mercy, he would not have found out that the golden token in your hands was the clue he was looking for, and you would not have come to Machu Picchu. A few months ago, he would have chopped off your heads with a flying sword. Miao Yuan was also looking for the clue of the golden token. Lu Xiaobai, who was being held hostage by two of Shang Guanye's trusted disciples, turned her head around with difficulty and looked at the huge metal door. Shang Guanyi looked at Lu Xiaobai and suddenly laughed. He walked over and punched Lu Xiaobai's stomach. Lu Xiaobai opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood mixed with pieces of his internal organs. His body was already very weak, how could he withstand Shang Guanye's powerful punch? This punch had already taken away half of Lu Xiaobai's life. Looking at Shang Guanyi venting his anger on Wu Wang and the others, Miao Yuan said after a long while, all right, Shang Guanyi, from now on, the underhand sect will be under your control. Laughing proudly, Miao Yuan shook his head and said, teacher had sent all the disciples to investigate the whereabouts of this great void teleportation formation, but in the end, I was the one who took the lead. Not only did I find some clues, I even saw the real body of the great void teleportation formation. Sighing with mixed emotions, Miao Yuan squinted his eyes and said with a smile, the position of Green City sect leader will not be able to escape from my hands. Pointing at Wu Wang and the others, Miao Yuan said in a cold voice, just nice, the great Zhou star positioning talisman needs to be activated before it can determine the destination of the formation. Wouldn't it be too boring if the formation is not activated at all? After instructing Shang Guanyi to place Wu Wang and the others on the golden platform in the middle of the formation, Miao Yuan laughed out loud. To be able to die in such a strange ancient formation, to be able to die under the tremendous force of the heavens and earth, you ants are really lucky. While laughing, a golden light shot out from Miao Yuan's sleeve and hit the golden platform. Chapter 4. The Great Universal Dimensional Portal, also known as the Great Void Portal, was an ancient portal used by the ancient deities to travel between the stars. Without the protection of the Great Universal Dimensional Portal, only Earth immortals who had reached the peak of nascent soul realm, or those who were stronger than them, had the right to use the portal. If any living beings below the Earth immortal realm were to use the portal, they would be torn into pieces by the immense pulling force between the stars. Not only would their bodies be torn into pieces, even their souls would be turned into nothingness. Their souls would be destroyed, and they would never be able to reincarnate. This was the most miserable way to die in the world. Miao Yuan proudly explained the mysteries of the Great Universal Dimensional Portal to Wu Wang and the others. He kept describing the pain of being torn apart by the ancient portal, as well as the miserable scene of their souls and bodies being torn apart. Lu Xiaobai squinted her eyes, her eyeballs were moving rapidly, calculating the chances of turning the tables. But no matter how Lu Xiaobai calculated, in front of Miao Yuan who had an inhuman strength, all her methods were useless. Wu Qi looked at Miao Yuan with his teeth clenched, he swore word by word, if I don't die today, I'll definitely slaughter your entire sect. Miao Yuan didn't even bother to respond to Wu Qi. Don't die. How could that be possible? The Great Universal Dimensional Portal's reputation was not just for show. Only those with the protection of the Great Universal Dimensional Portal, or an Earth immortal who had reached the nascent soul realm would be torn into pieces by the portal. Wu Wang looked at Shang Guanyi and sneered, you don't want the sect leader's token anymore. If you swear to let Wu Qi and Xiao Bai go, the token is yours. Shang Guanyi turned his head around and said disdainfully, the underhand sect is already mine, it's just a token, I don't really care about it. With him, I'm still the sect leader, without him, I'm still the sect leader. Patting his own arm in a self-mocking manner, Shang Guanyi looked at Wu Wang honestly and said, I don't have the legendary meridians, so I can't use the legendary power of the sect leader token. Why would I let two of my enemies go for the impossible? Wu Wang let out a long sigh and shook his head. The Great Universal Dimensional Portal had already begun to operate. 360 jade boards began to revolve around the golden platform. Streams of colorful lights shot out, dyeing the huge spherical space in 7 different colors. It was a beautiful sight to behold. A huge pressure was being emitted from the formation, forcing Shen Guanyi and the other disciples of the underhand sect to keep retreating. Only Miao Yuan and the 8 other Taoists were barely able to stabilize their bodies under the pressure. When the golden platform let out a faint golden glow and enveloped Wu Wang and the other 2, Miao Yuan took out a shining golden talisman and aimed it at the great universal dimensional portal. Sensing that Wu Wang and the others were confused, Miao Yuan smiled and began to explain the origin of the talisman. A few months ago, during the ancestral worshipping ceremony of Mount Qingcheng, a few of the legendary ancestral masters who had ascended to the realm of immortals had given them a book on cultivating qi. At the back of the book, there were 9 great heavenly positioning talismans attached. The ancestral masters of Mount Qingcheng were shocked when they heard that there were demons from the outer path who had set up the great universal dimensional portal in the human world. They wanted to use the portal to travel between the human world and the realm of immortals. That was why they requested the disciples of the human world to find the portal and use the great heavenly positioning talisman to determine the destination of the portal. As long as they could determine the destination of the portal, the ancestral masters of Mount Qingcheng would be able to destroy the portal with a thunderous force and eliminate the disaster. The great heavenly positioning talisman contained the location of all the stars in the universe. As long as the power of the great universal dimensional portal was activated, the star positioning talisman would be able to find the final destination of the portal and send it to the ancestral masters of Mount Qingcheng. Wu Qi listened attentively to Miao Yuan's explanation. The ancestral masters of Mount Qingcheng, he had also listed these people as his enemies. Lu Xiaobai looked at Miao Yuan in shock and said, "Immortals really exist? Are there really demons and ghosts? Are you sure that the things you got from the ancestral worshipping ceremony are not the result of your collective hysteria?" Miao Yuan was furious. He raised the great heavenly positioning talisman that was glowing with a blinding golden light, stared at Lu Xiaobai and scolded, "How dare you? I, the ancestral masters of Mount Qingcheng, naturally have ascended to the realm of immortals. Hysteria? Bullshit. What kind of hysteria could set up the great universal dimensional portal?" Lu Xiaobai shut his mouth. He looked at the jade plates that were spinning around him and was speechless. The great universal portal spun rapidly, and the pressure from the surroundings became stronger and stronger. The bones in the 3's body started to creak. The great universal portal indeed lived up to its name. This was a transportation tool used by immortals to travel back and forth. It was not something that mortals could withstand. Especially Lu Xiaobai, who was the weakest among them. Blood was flowing out from all 7 of his orifices. His body was limp on the golden platform and he could not move at all. Miao Yuan laughed in disdain. This was just the pressure from when the portal was just starting to activate. When the portal officially started to teleport, it would be the time when Lu Xiaobai and the rest of them were scared out of their wits. Using the great universal dimensional portal to kill people was really creative. Shen Guanyi looked at Lu Xiaobai, who was bleeding out from all 7 orifices. It was this pretty boy who had given Wu Wang advice and plans, allowing Wu Wang to build up such a strong force in the underhand sect in just a few years. He had even surpassed him, the son of the previous sect leader. If it wasn't for Lu Xiaobai, Shen Guanyi thought that he would be able to fight evenly with Wu Wang. How could he have lost so badly a few months ago and almost lost all his strength? Luckily, he had chosen to rely on the right person. Shen Guanyi gazed at Miao Yuan, who was trembling from head to toe, and let out a comfortable sigh. This time, after killing Wu Wang and the other 2, the underhand sect would be his. Although Shen Guanyi said that he did not care about the sect leader's token, but after this matter was settled, he still had to go to the Swiss bank's vault to find the token. The underhand sect's patriarchs had told him that the token contained a big secret of the underhand sect. If he were to give up on the token just like that, he would not be satisfied. Too bad, the requirements of the big secret were too strict. Shen Guanyi furrowed his brows in anger. Miao Yuan held the great heavenly positioning talisman in his hand and injected all of his vital energy into it. A thin golden line shot out from the talisman and tightly wrapped around the great universal dimensional portal's golden platform. The talismans on the platform began to shine, and the great heavenly positioning talisman also began to shine with a corresponding light. A huge wave of magical energy rippled in all four directions. Except for Miao Yuan, the others were already lying on the ground, unable to move. Wu Wang and the other two were tightly bound by the huge pressure, they couldn't even move a finger. Feeling the terrifying pressure from all directions, Wu Wang suddenly let out a long sigh. Shang Guanyi, this time, you've won. Shang Guanyi, who was lying on the ground, started laughing out loud. You don't have to tell me, I know I've won. Raising his head proudly, Shang Guanyi said in a cold voice, the underhand sect is mine. Wu Wang, you can't win against me. Standing on the golden platform and looking down at Shang Guanyi, Wu Wang sneered, I've never put the underhand sect in my eyes. If it wasn't for the fact that my mission is to become the top management of the underhand sect, why would I fight with you? Shang Guanyi and the other disciples of the underhand sect opened their mouths wide, they were all stunned. Sighing, Wu Wang muttered to himself, after holding it in for so many years, I can finally take a breather. Looking at the stunned Shang Guanyi, Wu Wang sneered, to be honest, I'm a spy. My mission is to control the underhand sect. With the power of the underhand sect, you should have heard of Heaven's Net, right? I was sent by them. Shang Guanyi stared at Wu Wang blankly, then suddenly cursed, fuck you. You're a traitor. Wu Wang sneered and said indifferently, Lu Xiaobai joined the underhand sect for the thrill. So, if he's killed, I won't feel sad at all. Lu Xiaobai looked at Wu Wang bitterly. He cried out, Brother Wu, you can't say that. Wu Wang ignored Lu Xiaobai and continued, but Wu Qi, I'm the one who pulled him into the underhand sect. Because I found out that he might have the underhand sect's legendary heaven-stealing meridian. So, I took him as my disciple. So, I have to be responsible for his life. Glancing at Miao Yuan, who was trying his best to maintain the great heavenly positioning talisman, Wu Wang let out a strange smile and said, Wu Qi is my disciple. So, if you want to kill him, I'll definitely avenge him. Clenching his teeth together, Wu Wang used all his strength to bite off his own tongue. The huge pressure from all directions of the array came crashing down on him. Wu Wang spat out more than 10 meters of blood like a fountain. His body was losing a lot of blood. His life was quickly leaving Wu Wang. Wu Wang's heart stopped beating. The great universal dimensional portal suddenly exploded with a blinding light. The portal was finally activated. Wu Wang and the other two were about to be teleported away. At the same time, the great heavenly positioning talisman in Miao Yuan's hand also let out a blinding golden light. The talisman was about to lock onto the destination of the portal. At this critical moment, Wu Wang's left calf suddenly exploded. The violent explosive force swept across the surroundings. It immediately caused the great universal dimensional portal to become chaotic. One by one, the jade plates shattered. The twisting power of space twisted the golden platform into the shape of a fried dough twist. The protective barrier of the portal was shattered. The energy inside the great universal dimensional portal exploded crazily. A blinding light pillar shot up into the sky from the center of Machu Picchu. It then quickly spread out in all directions. A mushroom cloud rushed out of Machu Picchu with a loud roar, and several nearby mountains were crushed at the same time. The huge shockwave swept across the surroundings. Hills collapsed, rivers stopped flowing. Trees were snapped in half and thrown into the sky. The earth rumbled. The clouds in the sky rumbled. The mountains around Machu Picchu were shaking violently like water. Huge cracks appeared on the ground. A few mountains were swallowed by the cracks and sank deep into the ground. After a long time, when everything had calmed down, Machu Picchu disappeared. A huge pit with a circumference of 100 miles and a depth of 30 miles was left. Chapter 5. It felt like a second, but it also felt like a lifetime. Wu Qi was staring at Miao Yuan and Shang Guanyi, who were standing outside the Taishu dimensional portal when the portal suddenly exploded. Wu Wang's left calf bones suddenly exploded with a powerful force. The shockwave disrupted the energy flow of the Taishu dimensional portal. Huge amounts of energy collided with each other, just like a nuclear chain reaction, and a terrifying explosion took place. In just a blink of an eye, not even a millionth of a second, the Taishu dimensional portal had already finished storing energy and sent Wu Qi, Lu Xiaobai, and Wu Wang out. The huge explosion had destroyed hundreds of kilometers of mountain ridges around Machu Picchu, but it did not harm even a single hair on the three of them. At that moment, Wu Qi suddenly saw an endless amount of light flashing in front of his eyes. It was as if a thin layer of soap bubble had broken through, and Wu Qi suddenly saw a bright starry sky. It was completely different from the starry sky that he usually saw on Earth at night. The planet that he saw now was extremely huge, the light was extremely dazzling, and the whole planet was golden. Countless stars were hanging far away in the sky, but it felt as if they were right in front of him. The densely packed stars quickly turned into streams of light and flew far away. The huge pressure of the stars was crazily coming from all directions. Wu Wang's body, whose left leg had exploded long ago, flashed for a moment, and was crushed into countless pieces by the pressure. Lu Xiaobai could only let out a cry of despair, and his weak body had also exploded. Both of them were crushed into the tiniest energy particles. Two strange colorful lights shot out from their bodies, and were also crushed by the pressure around them. When Wu Qi saw the two lights, he instinctively knew that they were the souls of Wu Wang and Lu Xiaobai. When their souls were crushed and turned into countless rainbow-colored particles, Wu Qi burst into tears and screamed hysterically. Wu Wang and Lu Xiaobai, a teacher and a friend, were the ones who brought Wu Qi out of the terrible Africa, taught Wu Qi all his skills, and gave Wu Qi the strength to survive in this world. Now, the two of them had been forcefully torn apart in front of his eyes. Moreover, it was the most miserable way of dying, with their souls dispersing into nothingness. Master! Little White! The corner of Wu Qi's eyes cracked, and a large amount of blood spurted out. The tremendous pressure crushed Wu Qi's tears and blood, and in the blink of an eye, it was applied to his body. The shadow of death instantly descended, and Wu Qi's heart suddenly stopped beating. He opened his mouth, and seemed to feel the big mouth of the god of death spitting out a bone-piercing cold air in front of him. He seemed to have seen himself being crushed into pieces like Wu Wang and Lu Xiaobai, and even his soul being completely destroyed. With a crisp sound, Wu Qi's clothes were torn apart, and his skin was torn by the huge pressure. A large amount of blood spurted out. Right at that moment, a soft yet cold airflow gushed out from under Wu Qi's feet. The underhand sect leader's token that Wu Qi had hidden under his feet touched Wu Qi's blood, and suddenly burst out a dazzling blue light. A dense, soft yet cold airflow gushed out from the sect leader's token, and instantly flowed around Wu Qi's body. The cold airflow flowed around Wu Qi's body in the blink of an eye, and quickly concentrated in both of Wu Qi's arms. Wu Qi only felt that both of his arms were cold as if they were soaked in ice water. It was so cold that his entire body was shivering, and both of his arms could no longer move. They were all frozen by the hidden airflow. The cold airflow flowed through Wu Qi's arms inch by inch, and finally, the underhand sect leader's token quietly shattered into pieces. A blue water light the size of a water tank shot out from the token, and quietly entered Wu Qi's body. A satisfied sigh sounded in the air, and it was faint like the sigh of a ghost. A strong suction force came out from Wu Qi's body, and Wu Wang and Lu Xiaobai's shattered soul particles were absorbed into Wu Qi's body. Wu Qi's body stiffened, and suddenly, a dazzling blue light burst out from his body. His brain shook, and he fainted. Half asleep and half awake, Wu Qi only felt that his body was floating in a pitch-black void, and right in front of him, a hazy figure that looked like it would disappear at any time was looking at him from afar. With a sigh, Wu Qi seemed to hear the figure say something. The heavens have not cut off my descendants. Today, I have finally seen the 7 stealing heaven arteries. My Tao has a successor. One after another, sparkling and translucent ancient characters that looked like they were carved out of crystals, shining with a magnificent and mysterious 7-colored light appeared in the pitch-black void. The figure chanted with a loud voice, and with every word he spat out, a 7-colored character would take shape in the void. The first character that appeared in front of Wu Qi was the Scroll of Stealing. The Tao can be stolen, but there is no Tao. The Tao of man, the heaven and earth have too much, but man is not enough. Take the Tao of the heaven and earth to make up for yourself. Others have too much, but I am not enough. Take the Tao of the heaven and earth to make up for myself. The sea can contain hundreds of rivers, but it is big enough, the accumulation of sand and soil, only then will there be a majestic mountain, the accumulation of a drop of water, only then will there be a boundless ocean. Therefore, there is nothing in the world that cannot be taken, and nothing that cannot be stolen. Millions of words were chanted by the figure, word by word revealed in the void. Wu Qi could barely hear it, but he could remember it very clearly. Every word had directly merged into his soul, and he would never forget it again. The force of the grand universal dimensional formation pushed Wu Qi to travel at a very fast speed in the vast void. In every blink of an eye, he had traveled an unknown distance, and had broken through many layers of natural barriers in the void, either created by someone or intentionally. The dark blue water wave protected Wu Qi, and the bone-chilling cold energy kept cleansing Wu Qi's body. Large amounts of dirt and impurities kept oozing out from Wu Qi's body, turning into black filth that was crushed by the surrounding pressure. With both of Wu Qi's arms as the core, along with the mumbling of the figure, the cold energy started to circulate around his body. The first chapter of the Scroll of Stealing was a Qi cultivation skill, 7 foundation establishment technique, water source chapter. Gradually, it took root in Wu Qi's body. Wu Qi took a deep breath, and with the help of the water source chapter, he guided the dark blue energy in his body to slowly circulate around his body. Slowly, as the cultivation of the water source chapter entered the best stage, Wu Qi's body actually produced the sound of waves that sounded like the flowing of a great river. In Wu Qi's mind, the pitch-black divine sense of the purple mansion had started glowing with a faint watery light. Vaguely, one could see thousands of waves rushing in his purple mansion. The blurry figure was hovering above the 100,000 feet tall waves, and was teaching Wu Qi a complicated and abstruse scroll of stealing. After that, there was a long silence. The figure stared at Wu Qi quietly, and suddenly breathed out a deep sigh. Coming under my tutelage is your fate, but it is also your misfortune. In the future, you will be the one to decide your fate. If it's a blessing, don't thank me, if it's a misfortune, don't blame me. My Tao can only be passed down to one person in each generation. If you can live a peaceful life, of course, that's good. If you die, try your best to pass down my Tao. Shaking his head, the figure suddenly let out 3 loud laughs, and casually slapped on Wu Qi's head. His body shook, and suddenly, Wu Qi opened his eyes and woke up. The dark blue water wave that was protecting his body had been completely absorbed by his body, and was now turning into waves that were flowing in the meridians in both of his arms. The immense pressure from the surrounding stars was making all of his bones creak. It looked like his body could no longer withstand the pressure, and was about to be crushed into pieces. A thin mist came out from between Wu Qi's eyebrows, and instantly transformed into the figure that Wu Qi saw in his divine sense of the purple mansion. What an unlucky kid! The blurry figure, whose face could not be seen clearly, let out a strange laugh and suddenly exploded. A layer of mist wrapped around Wu Qi's body, and suddenly brought him forward at a very fast speed. The speed was 1,000,000 times faster than the great universal dimensional portal. Wu Qi could no longer withstand the sudden increase in speed, and the skin on his body cracked inch by inch. He rolled his eyes and fainted again. The mist was getting thinner and thinner, and was about to disappear. Just before the mist finally dissipated, a dull thunderbolt whizzed out from the faint mist, instantly shattering the void. Wu Qi, who was bleeding profusely from head to toe and looked like a ragged sack of flesh, spun and flew into the shattered space. In the end, the mist vanished into thin air, leaving behind an extremely soft sigh. My disciple, live on. Chapter 6. It was a dense forest. Standing on top of the mountain, one could only see the endless darkness of the night, filled with tall and sturdy trees. A few nocturnal birds were startled. They hid in the shadows of the bushes and let out sharp and unpleasant cries, making the forest look a little more ferocious at night. The sound of grass rubbing against each other rang out, and a ferocious tiger about 15 feet long with a black body leaped out of the underbrush in a panic. Before all four of the tiger's feet could touch the ground, the void in front of it suddenly twisted. Wu Qi, whose body was scorched and almost covered in a layer of blood, was thrown out from the void, smashing heavily onto the ground right in front of the tiger. The ferocious black tiger instinctively swung its paw towards Wu Qi's head. The tiger's paw, which was as big as a palm leaf fan, brought up a strong gust of wind. It was so powerful that it could smash a rock into pieces. A few curses came from the forest behind. 5 to 6 arrows were shot towards them with a shrill sound of wind breaking. Another wave of movement came from the underbrush. 3 strange beasts that looked like elk but only had a single antler in the middle of their heads rushed out, carrying 3 strong men dressed in coarse linen clothes on their backs. The black tiger heard the sound of the arrow piercing through the air coming from its back. It did not have the time to smash Wu Qi's head, so it hastily twisted its waist and moved its huge body to the side. The arrow barely brushed past its body. A few cold stars flashed past the black tiger's shiny black fur. The sharp arrowheads brought up a few thin strands of tiger fur. Before the frightened black tiger could land on the ground, the 3 strong men had already driven their mounts and rushed to its back. A pure iron spear, as thick as a small bowl, jumped right under the black tiger's belly. The strong man who was holding the spear used the momentum of his mount to lift the spear. The black tiger's body, which was at least 2,000 to 3,000 pounds, was suddenly pushed to the side. The black tiger lost its balance. It could not stand steadily when it landed on the ground. It rolled a few times on the ground. The other 2 burly men let out sharp hisses of joy. They howled rudely and swung their swords and sabers towards the black tiger's neck. The unsteady black tiger did not manage to dodge in time. The sword and saber slashed on the left and right sides of its neck. In the dark forest, 2 streams of blood that were a few feet high spurted out. The black tiger let out a desperate roar. It gathered all of its strength and twisted its waist. Its thick tiger tail swept out with a gust of wind. The strong man with the big saber didn't have time to dodge and was hit in the chest by the tiger's tail, sending him flying 7 or 8 feet away. The sound of ribs breaking could be heard. The brawny man who was sent flying spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. He fell to the ground and rolled a few times. He no longer had the strength to get up. The brawny man who had just sent the black tiger flying let out a furious roar. His iron spear struck out like a venomous python and pierced the black tiger's neck. A few more arrows were shot from behind, hitting the black tiger's fleshy and round buttocks. The arrows were coated with a strong anesthetic. The black tiger suffered a few severe injuries. Its body twitched and crawled on the ground for a while. Finally, its body stiffened. A few strong men riding on odd-shaped deer with bows in their hands slowly emerged from the bushes. The crowd cheered in unison. The man with the iron spear dropped his weapon and jumped down from his mount. He grabbed his companion who was sent flying by the tiger's tail and brought him close to the tiger's neck. The injured man quickly opened his mouth and gulped down the tiger's blood. Not long after, he was able to support his body and stand up. The men cheered again. At this time, a man with a bow in his hand found Wu Qi who was lying naked on the ground. A few men came to Wu Qi's side. They wiped the thick blood stains on Wu Qi's chest and looked at the broken skin on his chest. They nodded their heads and whispered something to each other. They dragged Wu Qi to the side of the tiger, opened Wu Qi's mouth and poured the tiger's blood into his stomach. They roughly threw Wu Qi onto the back of a mount like a ragged sack. A few burly men happily chopped down some branches and made a stretcher. Then, they carried the sturdy tiger on their shoulders, humming a rough and unknown tune as they happily crossed the mountains and crossed the ridges. When Wu Qi woke up from his coma, he was lying on a bed that was emitting a pungent smell of wild animals. This was a wooden house that was several tens of feet in length and width. It was built with logs that were at least 2 feet thick. The bark on the tree trunks had not even been shaved clean. Some of the tree trunks with strong vitality even had new branches that were 2 to 3 feet long. However, no one had taken care of them. Apart from a crude wooden table and a few round wooden stakes that served as stools, there was only the stone bed that Wu Qi was lying on in the room. Dozens of animal skins were spread on the stone bed, which was cut from a mountain rock. These skins were not tanned well, so they still carried the natural body odor of wild animals. Fierce tigers, wild bears, leopards, and all kinds of wild animals were on the bed. There were also some skins that Wu Qi didn't recognize. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. An extremely strong and gentle force was generated inside his body. With the water vein in his 7 stealing heaven meridians as the core, the force instantly spread throughout his body. Wu Qi focused his mind and looked inside his body. He could vaguely feel that the thick and tough meridians in his body were glowing with a faint blue watery light. The water source chapter of the 7 foundation technique, the circulation of the force inside his body was so familiar. Big drops of tears flowed down from the corner of Wu Qi's eyes. His body was twitching violently, and he almost cried out loud. During the teleportation process, Wu Wang and Lu Xiaobai's bodies had turned into ashes, and their souls had been crushed into the tiniest soul particles. When the mysterious figure was teaching Wu Qi the scroll of stealing, all the soul particles had surged into Wu Qi's mind under the tremendous pressure from the outside world, merging with Wu Qi's soul. Reading through the memories and knowledge that came from his soul, a stream of blood suddenly flowed out from the corner of Wu Qi's mouth. All of Wu Wang and Lu Xiaobai's experience and knowledge had merged with Wu Qi's soul, becoming a part of Wu Qi's soul. Out of nowhere, Wu Qi had obtained all of Wu Wang's combat knowledge and will, as well as all his combat experience and all sorts of strange and bizarre experiences. He had also obtained Lu Xiaobai's monstrous knowledge, and his amazing memory and comprehensive ability. The scroll of stealing, taking other people's surplus to make up for one's own deficiency. When cultivating the scroll of stealing for the first time, the biggest benefit that Wu Qi had obtained was indeed from his most respected master and his most beloved friend. This was the same as Wu Qi forcibly devouring the souls of Wu Wang and Lu Xiaobai. How could he not be sad? How could he not be sad? The huge explosion that erupted from Wu Wang's left leg, Wu Qi knew the cause and effect of it. Before he snuck into the underhand sect and became a spy, Wu Wang's left leg was implanted with a powerful metal hydrogen bomb. The bomb was connected to Wu Wang's vital signs. When Wu Wang's life ended, when his heart stopped beating, the bomb would explode. Knowing that once they entered the great universal dimensional portal, the 3 of them would die, Wu Wang committed suicide, detonating the bomb in his leg. In the end, it triggered a chain reaction in the great universal dimensional portal, blowing up Miao Yuan, Sheng Guanyi, and the others into ashes. Master, and, Lu Xiaobai, you guys died just like that? Wu Qi's body curled up, and he suddenly cried out loud. He cried so hard that blood and tears were flying everywhere, and his body was convulsing violently. No matter how many things he had done in the underhand sect, no matter how many things he had experienced, he was still a teenager. His master who had given him a second chance at life was dead, his brothers who were as close as brothers were dead, and the greedy wolf group's young men who had been with him every day were all killed. His body was trapped in the great universal dimensional portal, and he had no idea where he was. Wu Qi felt like he was a kite with a broken string, floating in the air, losing his direction, losing his goal. Just as Wu Qi was crying out loud, the door of the wooden house was suddenly kicked open, and a muscular man who was definitely more than 2 meters tall walked in. He was holding a porcelain bowl that was the size of a small wash basin and slammed it on the table. This muscular man with a face full of black hair shouted, "Foreigner, are you a man or a woman? What are you crying for? What are you crying for?" The muscular man's voice was coarse and unpleasant to listen to. His words were also very vulgar, and he had a strong local accent. Wu Qi himself could not understand the muscular man's words. Fortunately, he had combined all of Wu Wang and Lu Xiaobai's memories and experiences. Wu Wang had seen a lot, and he had almost traveled all over the world. Lu Xiaobai had a monstrous IQ, and she had learned most of the original world's languages, including the native African tribes' dialects. Therefore, Wu Qi could understand the muscular man's words. This muscular man's accent was similar to the northeast accent of Hebei's Tianjin area, but it also had some local slang. When Wu Wang was training in a mountain area near a village that had been sealed off for a long time, the accent of the old man in the village was about 50 to 60% similar to this muscular man. Wiping away the blood and tears at the corner of his eyes, Wu Qi stood up and bowed to the muscular man. "Thank you for saving my life, uncle. What uncle said is right, men should not cry." After being yelled at by the muscular man, Wu Qi suddenly understood. What was the point of crying? What was the point of crying? If Lord Daoist Miao Yuan and Shen Guanyi were not dead, all he had to do was train hard and think of a way to get revenge on them. If they were dead, then he had to eradicate the Green City faction, and avenge Wu Wang, Lu Xiaobai, and his brothers in the Greedy Wolf group. The willpower that Wu Wang had given to Wu Qi had a great effect. Wu Qi stopped crying and quickly made a decision. The weak aura on his body had completely disappeared, and a murderous aura that was as sharp as a steel blade spread out. The muscular man nodded at Wu Qi in agreement, then pointed at the big bowl on the table and said with a smile, "This is what a man should do. Ha, I made you a bowl of tiger meat, quickly eat it to replenish your energy." The meat of the luminous tiger, men eat it to strengthen their sex drive, and women eat it to stimulate their breasts. It's the best food. After a short pause, the muscular man's eyes suddenly bulged, then he pointed at Wu Qi and shouted, "What did you call me? Uncle? Am I that old? I'm only 14 years old this year, and you're calling me uncle. You brat, am I that old, 14 years old?" Wu Qi stared at the 2-meter-tall man, looked at the dense black hair on his face, and then looked at his face that seemed to have gone through the vicissitudes of life and his wild temperament. Was this how a 14-year-old teenager should look like? But, maybe, the way of counting the years here was different from the one he was familiar with. After thinking about this, Wu Qi quickly cupped his hands towards the muscular man and said, Wu Qi was too reckless. "Little brother, thank you for saving me." The little brother with a face full of black hair laughed 3 times. He took out 2 linen clothes from the animal skin bag at his waist and threw them to Wu Qi. He said with a smile, "Little brother, I like what you said. Quickly eat the meat, our clan elder wants to ask you something." The muscular man proudly shook his head and left Wu Qi behind. He twisted his butt and walked out of the wooden house. Wu Qi blankly looked at the big bowl on the table. He looked at the tiger meat in the bowl that was at least 5 pounds, and his eyebrows deeply wrinkled. With a sigh, he reluctantly ate a few pieces of tiger meat and drank 2 mouthfuls of meat soup to quench his thirst. Then, Wu Qi walked out with large strides. A beautiful mountain village impressively appeared in front of Wu Qi. Chapter 7. Standing in front of the door and looking into the distance, a few miles away, there was a big river with billowing waves. The river was nearly 100 meters wide, and a pontoon bridge was built across the river. On the other side of the bridge, there was a dirt road that extended into the dense forest, leading to an unknown destination. On the other side of the bridge, there were a few watchtowers made of earth and wood, and on the other side of the bridge, there were 2 leather ropes. This was a suspension bridge. Behind the bridge, there was a green mountain that looked like a barrier. 2 mountain ridges stretched out like 2 arms, gently hugging a flat land with a radius of more than 10 miles. The mountain was steep, and under the towering trees that were tens of meters high, there were dense thorns and thorns. Even a mouse would have a hard time passing through. In front of the house, there was a green mountain. This small piece of flat land had fertile soil and flourishing vegetation. There were also 2 small streams flowing through it. It was indeed a good place to settle down. Not far away from Wuqi's wooden house, there were several hundred wooden houses of different sizes standing in the middle of the lush greenery. Between the houses were flat farmlands and vegetable fields, and a few dogs were chasing after a pack of single-horned pack animals that looked like deer. The burly man who brought food and clothes to Wuqi just now was squatting under a clump of safflower trees in front of the house, breathing heavily as he dug out a piece of white tree root. Hearing the sound of Wuqi coming out of the house, the man hurriedly stuffed the root into the animal skin bag on his waist, turned around and greeted Wuqi with a smile. Red Flower Vine, specialized in treating all kinds of internal injuries and bleeding in women. Hey, looks like you don't need it anymore. Wuqi nodded to him gratefully and asked, Little brother, what's your name? Wuqi, thank you for saving my life. The man was stunned for a second, then he suddenly laughed and said, Wuqi. That's a nice name. What's your name? It makes me sick. My nickname is Doggy. My real name, I don't have a real name yet. I need to be 16 years old, then I can ask the elders to name me. Doggy walked to Wuqi's side and gave him a slap on the face. Then, he pulled Wuqi to the front of the village, where the suspension bridge was. While walking, Doggy proudly bragged about the magical effects of the luminous tiger's blood that his father fed to Wuqi the night before. According to him, the blood of the luminous tiger could bring the dead back to life, and cure all kinds of injuries. It was an omnipotent medicine. Wuqi just listened to Doggy with a smile on his face. He glanced around at the surrounding scenery and made some judgments in his mind. The production level here was not high, it could even be said to be very low. However, the people here were all very strong. He saw a few women who went to the river to fetch water. The buckets they carried were more than a meter in diameter. They were basically two small water tanks. Every household here was equipped with swords, spears, bows, and arrows. A group of children were practicing martial arts on a small piece of flat land in the village. The weapons in their hands were all shiny and real. Looking at the weight of the knives and spears, they were at least 50 to 60 kilograms heavy weapons. These children, who were about 7 to 8 years old, were wielding these knives and swords with great vigor. Wuqi suddenly had an idea. He silently exercised a mystic technique found in the Source of Water chapter, injecting the innate water energy into his eyes. Immediately, both his eyes were covered with a layer of faint blue light. Looking at those children wielding knives and spears, Wuqi was surprised to find that these children were full of blood and qi, and there was a strong internal energy rolling in their bodies. Basically, these children were comparable to the elite disciples of the underhand sex-greedy wolf group. The internal energy in their bodies was at least at the level of 3 to 5 years of hard work. Wuqi gasped, and only then did he suddenly realize that the density of the natural energies in the air was incredibly high. The scroll of stealing was all-encompassing, it contained endless mysteries. This so-called natural energy was also mentioned in the scroll of stealing. The natural energy was the foundation of all qi cultivators. The higher the density of the natural energy, the faster the cultivation speed, and the greater the benefits to the cultivator. The spirit qi of heaven and earth on earth had long been destroyed by industrial production. It was almost a desert of spirit qi. But in this small village, the density of the natural energy in this small piece of land, it was almost comparable to the level of the lower-grade paradise described in the scroll of stealing. No wonder all the children here had a cultivation base of internal energy, no wonder Doggy could grow so tall and strong. In a place with an abundance of natural energy, even a sweet potato would grow stronger and fatter than any other place, not to mention humans. Along the way, Doggy seemed to be quite famous in the village. There were many men, women, old and young who greeted him. The older ones would call him Doggy, those who were around the same age would call him Brother Doggy, and those who were younger would respectfully call him Uncle Doggy. Especially a few girls in the village that Wuqi found to be quite good-looking, they were coy and shy from afar, they would greet Doggy with blushing faces. The soil here was fertile, the natural energy was abundant, the geomancy was excellent, it was a good place to raise people. Although the men raised here were as tall and strong as Doggy, but those girls were delicate and lovely, water could be squeezed out of them. Wu Qi looked at those girls, he couldn't help but feel a little shaken, that kind of natural beauty, it was something he had never seen before. Deactivating the spirit eye, Wu Qi shook his head. Now was not the time to care about the beauty of these girls, he had to first figure out where he was. Following Doggy all the way to the village entrance, which was also the suspension bridge at the end of the pontoon bridge, Wu Qi saw a few old men with walking sticks in their hands, leading a group of strong men. They were cursing and beating up a few people who were rolling on the ground. Those strong men were about the same size as Doggy, they were all men with arms that could run horses, it was normal for them to hit and scold people. However, those few old men with walking sticks in their hands were so old that their waists were bent like a bow. They were not inferior to the young men, they were holding the walking sticks full of barbs, they were cursing and beating the people on the ground, it was a very shocking scene. When Wu Qi and Doggy walked to the side of the crowd, they seemed to have vented the anger in their hearts. An old man coughed a few times, the walking stick fiercely hit the ground, and screamed a few times. A few strong men swiftly picked up the people on the ground, they held daggers in their hands and cleanly slit their necks. Blood spurted out, the few people twitched and screamed miserably. The villagers hurriedly took the hemp ropes, they hung up the few people whose necks were constantly spurting blood, and hung them high up under the Archer Tower at the end of the bridge. Apart from these few people who were still screaming, still bleeding, there were more than 30 corpses hanging under the Archer Tower. Some of these corpses had only been dead for a few days, and some had already turned into dried corpses. Their clothes were stripped clean, revealing their tan skin, as well as the bright red, green, and green embroidery on their skin. Those tattoos looked ferocious and mysterious, there were all kinds of wild beasts, poisonous bugs, and many strange flowers and plants. Looking at the few men who were struggling and twitching on the ropes, all the villagers, including the few old men, laughed out loud. There was no ferociousness in their laughter, there was only a surprising sense of relaxation and happiness. Wu Qi stared at this scene in astonishment. Suddenly he heard Doggy shouting happily, "These barbarians came to our village to seek death again, aren't they just giving our village credit for nothing?" Dozens of people at the end of the bridge looked over at the same time, especially those few old men with walking sticks, their attention was all on Wu Qi. Wu Qi solemnly bowed to the few old men, cupped his fist and made a deep bow. "I am Wu Qi, together with my esteemed teacher and my fellow disciples, we encountered a great disaster. Luckily, you elders saved us, I am very grateful." Before the few old men could say anything, Wu Qi had already knelt down on the ground, and kowtowed 3 times to the few old men respectfully. 3 kowtows was considered a light punishment for saving his life. Wu Qi was really grateful to these villagers who saved him. They saved him, and that was why he had a chance to avenge Wu Wang and Lu Xiaobai in the future. How could he not be grateful to them? If not for the fact that he had nothing on him, and even his clothes were shredded into pieces in the great universal dimensional portal, Wu Qi would definitely reward them handsomely. Among the few old men, the oldest one, who looked like a bag of bones, and whose face was full of age spots, smiled. He walked to Wu Qi's side shakily, and pulled him up with one hand. "We are all citizens of the great Yan kingdom, why are you talking so much nonsense?" Little brother, are you the wanderer barbarian hunters?" Wu Qi climbed up the pole, stood up, and nodded his head respectfully. "Old man's eyes are like a torch, yes, I am." The strong men behind the old man became restless. They murmured in a low voice, as if they were cursing those damn barbarians for owing another blood debt. After absorbing Lu Xiaobai's monstrous intelligence, Wu Qi quickly analyzed something. He clenched his teeth and swore, "My esteemed teacher and my fellow disciples were all killed by them. This hatred, is absolutely irreconcilable. When I go back, I will definitely train hard, and in the future, I will kill all my enemies, and avenge my esteemed teacher and my fellow disciples." The strong men were talking about the unknown barbarians, but the one Wu Qi swore was the Qing City Qing Qingdao Lord Miao Yuan sect. However, both sides were in perfect agreement. The few old men nodded their heads in approval and exclaimed, a good man should be like this. You are the wanderer barbarian hunters who travel around the world to kill barbarians. If you don't even avenge your fellow disciples, it will be a disgrace. The old man who helped Wu Qi up just now patted Wu Qi's chest, shook his head and said, "But, little brother Wu Qi, your body is too weak, you are no match for those barbarians." The old man sighed and said politely, "We, the Meng village, have a secret recipe passed down from generation to generation, using the bones and tendons of beasts combined with dozens of herbs. It is the best way to strengthen your bones and increase your height. Before I leave, I will give you 100 packets of herbal plasters. I guarantee that your height will increase by a lot." Hearing what the old man said, Wu Qi did not know whether he should laugh or cry. His body was the standard body of a handsome man on earth. Although he was a little skinny, he was not weak, and his muscles and bones had their own strength. After inheriting the scroll of stealing, he naturally knew that the strength of one's body had nothing to do with the size of one's body. However, faced with the kindness of the old man, Wu Qi could only bow deeply once again, thanking the few clan elders for their kind intentions. Wu Qi swore in his heart, if he becomes successful in his cultivation in the future, he will definitely come back to this village and thank the villagers. While he was making up his mind, a fist-sized green fireball suddenly shot out from the forest on the other side of the river. It hit a muscular man who was standing on the bridgehead. Along with a painful howl, the muscular man's entire body was ignited with a green flame, his body rolled a few times on the ground, and then it turned into a pile of ashes. The few elders were shocked, and the villagers who were standing guard on top of the archer tower screamed out, "The barbarians are attacking, there are so many barbarians." The ear-piercing sound of a bull horn resounded through the entire village, and from the forest on the other side of the river, a large group of barbarians wearing animal skins and tattoos suddenly rushed out. The leader of the barbarians was surrounded by a dense black gas, and a fist-sized pale green skull was faintly discernible within the black gas. Pointing his finger at the village, the leader of the barbarians shouted, "Men, kill them all, women, rob them all, children, eat them all. Children, attack." Chapter 8. A bright light flashed in front of his eyes. Wu Qi instinctively curled up his body and rolled 18 times backwards, hiding behind the arrow tower. Thud! A muffled noise rang out, as a 4 feet, 5 to 6 inches long, as thick as a thumb, and as sharp as a needle flew past Wu Qi's body, plunging deep into the ground about 70 to 80 feet behind him. As the prickle flew past him, Wu Qi smelled a faint sweet fishy smell. Obviously, the prickle was highly poisonous. Among the group of villagers, 2 sturdy men didn't manage to dodge in time and were pierced by the same prickle. Within the span of 2 to 3 breaths, the 2 sturdy men's bodies suddenly turned black and fell to the ground. Their bodies were twitching violently. The 2 sturdy men, who were more than 2 meters tall, quickly shrunk to the size of ordinary children. Dirty blood spurted out from their 7 apertures, and soon, a large piece of the ground was stained. Wu Qi's scalp went numb when he saw this. The poison of the prickle was so strong. On the other side of the river, there were at least 700 to 800 barbarians rushing out while howling. They were holding strong bows, which were wrapped by tree vines, and kept shooting prickle after prickle. With a swishing sound, wave after wave of prickle fell from the sky like raindrops, hitting the villagers near the suspension bridge. There were about 30 barbarians who were the fastest. Within the span of 2 to 3 waves of prickle, they had already rushed to the edge of the suspension bridge. The elder, who was talking to Wu Qi just now, suddenly raised his cane. His left hand's 5 fingers seemed to be bent, but not at the same time. He made a strange gesture and took a deep breath. The short and scrawny elder's chest suddenly swelled up, and he let out a muffled roar. Suddenly, he clenched his 5 fingers and released them. A strong gust of wind suddenly rose from the ground, covering an area with a radius of more than 100 feet. A wave of prickle fell from the sky. The gust of wind rolled up the prickle and shot it towards those barbarians who were about to reach the suspension bridge. The 30 barbarians were scared out of their wits. They dropped the strong bows in their hands and desperately jumped into the river. There were a few barbarians who jumped a little slower, and the prickles pierced deep into their bodies. In just a blink of an eye, their bodies turned black, and they died. Wu Qi's eyes gleamed as he stared at the clan elder. This technique was also mentioned in the Scroll of Stealing. It was the most basic spell of the 5 elements, a variant of the second wood element spell, the wind summoning spell. The clan elder's cultivation level was not high, so the violent wind he stirred up only covered an area of a few hundred feet. Once the brilliant wind summoning technique was used, it could change the weather within a radius of 10,000 miles. This was something that the elders of this small village in the wilderness could not do. An ear-piercing sound of breaking wind came from above. The villagers on top of a few archery towers had already drawn their bows, and dozens of arrows whistled as they shot down. The barbarians who jumped into the river had just popped their heads out of the water when powerful arrows hit their bodies, killing them in the water. On the other side of the river, the leader of the barbarians, who had dark smoke coiling around his body, let out a furious howl. He raised both of his hands up high and let out a loud cry, while his body twisted and danced for a while. Then, the pale green skull in the dark smoke opened its mouth and shot out another green fireball. The clan elder cried out, and all the villagers standing by the suspension bridge quickly dodged away. The villagers on duty on the archer tower used all their strength to pull up the suspension cable and was about to close the drawbridge. But the fireball flew precisely towards the arrow tower with its suspension cable. A loud boom rang out, and the green fireball exploded. A small half of the archery tower was blown into pieces, and the few villagers standing on top of it were ripped into pieces. The suspension bridge fell down with a loud thud. The barbarians let out excited cries. They threw away their strong bows, pulled out their blades and swords from their backs, and rushed towards the pontoon bridge while howling. The leader of the barbarians threw his head back and let out a wild roar, then another large group of barbarians rushed out from the dense forest behind him. This group of barbarians had more than 1,000 men, and they were all holding different kinds of weapons, cheering and jumping as they rushed towards the entrance of the village. Hurried footsteps came from behind, all the young men in the village heard the warning horn sound, and they all grabbed their weapons and rushed towards the entrance of the village. The Meng village had a large population, and the number of young men in the village was about 1,000 to 400, and all of them were strong men. Doggy took out 2 long swords from nowhere, and threw one of them to Wu Qi. "Big brother Wu Qi, be careful. Damn it, the Chifu barbarian and Huazu barbarian tribes have joined hands. Hee, if not, why would they have the guts to touch our Meng village?" Wu Qi caught the long sword, and his wrist immediately sank. Baring his teeth and looking at Doggy, Wu Qi smiled bitterly in his heart. This sword was 5 feet long, and it was as wide as an ordinary man's palm. The thickest part of the sword was 3 inches thick, and it weighed nearly 50 kilograms. It was perfect for these strong men from the Meng village. Their strength and size were more than enough to unleash the full power of this sword. But for Wu Qi, this sword was too heavy, too long, and too thick. He could almost use this sword as a shield. With a bitter smile, he stabbed the sword into the ground. Wu Qi looked to his left and right, and then he pulled out a thorn shot by a barbarian from the ground. This thorn was as thick as a pinky finger, and it was 4 feet 5 to 6 inches long. It weighed about 2 kilograms, and it was extremely tough. Wu Qi used his finger to gently pull it out, and the hardness of this thorn was similar to ordinary pig iron. This thing was perfect for Wu Qi, not to mention this thing had a strong poison, and its power was no less than that of the huge sword. Doggy looked at Wu Qi with surprise, and he shook his head disapprovingly. "Sigh, big brother Wu Qi, look at your strength. In our Meng village, you can't even find a woman." Doggy's words didn't have any evil intentions, it was purely a kind mockery. Wu Qi's face suddenly blushed. He looked at the huge sword that was stabbed into the ground, and he shook his head. This thing, he really couldn't control it. Although he had inherited the Scroll of Stealing, he hadn't had the time to cultivate it properly, he hadn't turned into a Superman yet. Taking a deep breath, Wu Qi held the thorn in his hand and stood next to Doggy. The thorn was firmly held in his hand, and a faint cold air was spreading out to the surroundings. Wu Qi slowly injected his innate water energy into the thorn, and the tip of the thorn was covered with a faint layer of water. Another series of footsteps sounded out, and more than 1,000 female villagers rushed out from the village with strong bows in their hands. They occupied the high ground behind the arrow towers, and they were either on the roofs, on the rocks, or on the treetops, and they were all pulling their bows and shooting arrows. Miserable howls kept sounding out, and more than 50 barbarians who were rushing out like crazy beasts were killed on the spot. The thumb-sized arrows pierced deep into their bodies, and they came out from the other side of their bodies, but not a single drop of blood came out. The barbarians who were hit by the arrows let out a miserable howl, their bodies twitched, and then they suddenly stiffened and died. Just like the barbarians, the arrows of the Meng village were also coated with poison. Those who were hit by the arrows, even if they didn't hurt their vital organs, they would definitely die. The barbarian leader who was standing on the other side of the river was screaming in anger. He gnashed his teeth and started twisting his waist and butt again, but suddenly, 2 streams of blood came out from his nostrils. The black smoke that was twining around him fluctuated, and the green skull in the black smoke issued a ghost-like wail and wolf-like howl. It suddenly opened its mouth, and spurted out 3 fist-sized green fireballs in a row. A few elders shouted out, and the villagers who were standing near the suspension bridge quickly moved back. The 3 green fireballs flew across the river and smashed into the area near the end of the suspension bridge. 3 loud booms sounded out, and 3 huge craters with a diameter of a few feet appeared on the ground near the end of the bridge. Large amounts of green fireballs shot out in all directions, and it was impossible to stand on the ground for more than 100 feet. The villagers who were moving back had disturbed the women's team, and it had slowed down the speed of their arrows. In just a blink of an eye, dozens of the tallest barbarians who had the most hideous embroidery on their bodies had already jumped onto the suspension bridge. They pulled out the small hand axes from their belts, and while shouting, they threw the axes at the villagers. One of the elders shouted out, "Shield!" Dozens of huge shields made from several layers of animal skins were raised up, and they were firmly placed in front of the villagers. Each of these barbarians was carrying 12 hand axes. Hundreds of hand axes flew over with a wind-breaking sound, and smashed onto the huge shields. Dozens of villagers who were holding onto the huge shields were forced back by the huge force of the hand axes. A few of them were even spitting out blood from their mouths, but they still managed to straighten their bodies and hold onto the shields tightly. Wu Qi could see the veins on their arms popping out, and the skin on their palms and the muscles between their thumb and index finger were all torn, and blood was dripping down from the huge shields. Doggy used his elbow to poke Wu Qi, and with a deep voice, he shouted, "Big brother Wu Qi, don't get distracted. These barbarians dared to attack our village, they might have some kind of evil plan. If we're not careful, we might die." Before he could finish his words, dozens of hand axes had already pierced through the gaps between the huge shields, and smashed into the group of villagers. Miserable howls sounded out, dozens of strong men from Meng village were hit by the hand axes, and they were flying up into the air, and blood was spewing out from their mouths. One of the strong men was hit in the chest by the hand axes, and his entire chest caved in, and a few of his ribs could be seen sticking out from his back. Doggy shouted, "Oh no, Uncle Meng Liang is dead." Seeing the hand axes had effectively killed the villagers, the barbarians started cheering. One of the elders suddenly shouted out, and the arrows that had just become sparse suddenly became denser. Thousands of strong women from the village started shooting arrows at Chi-Chi, and the rain of arrows completely blocked off the suspension bridge. The dozens of barbarians who threw the hand axes were screaming out in pain, and at least half of them had been pierced by the arrows. The suspension bridge was only 15 feet wide, and the back of the bridge was already filled with barbarians. When the barbarians at the front saw the rain of arrows coming at them, they had no choice but to learn from the first wave of barbarians, and jump off the bridge while clenching their teeth. A few ferocious river fishes that looked like crocodiles, but had a sharp horn on their head, suddenly emerged from the water. The teeth of these river fishes were extremely sharp, and they opened their mouths and crazily leaped towards those barbarians. The arms and legs of these barbarians were bitten off by these river fishes, and their blood quickly spread out in the river. The river nearby started boiling, and countless ferocious river fishes rushed over, opening their mouths and leaping towards those barbarians who had fallen into the water. The arrows kept falling down, and the barbarians on the suspension bridge couldn't move forward, and they couldn't retreat either. They were in an extremely awkward situation. The elder who used the wind-summoning spell let out a long sigh of relief, then he laughed out loud and said, "These barbarians are asking for death again. They come to our Meng village at least 3 to 5 times a year, and every time they come back in defeat. They are just giving our Meng village some credit." The villagers started laughing out loud, and they were enjoying the beautiful scene of the rain of arrows killing the barbarians. Just when all the villagers' attention was attracted by the barbarians on the suspension bridge, the sky suddenly darkened. Wu Qi raised his head up, and he saw nearly 100 eagles with a wingspan of more than 50 feet falling down from the sky. Following the ear-piercing screeches, a few hundred short barbarians wearing clothes made of feathers, and their exposed skin was also covered with all kinds of embroidery patterns. They were holding spears in their hands, and they quickly jumped down from the backs of the eagles. These barbarians landed directly in the middle of the villagers, and the spears in their hands fiercely pierced towards the villagers. In the blink of an eye, nearly 100 villagers were pierced by the spears, and they all fell to the ground covered in blood. The eagles, on the other hand, leaped straight towards those village women who were standing on high ground shooting arrows. Their huge claws swooped down, and after grabbing a few village women, they flew high up into the sky, and kept circling in the sky. The formation of the villagers was instantly thrown into chaos, and the flying arrows suddenly stopped. Doggy's long sword dropped to the ground, and he roared, "Damn it, why did the bird barbarian team up with them?" In the blink of an eye, a spear, like a poisonous snake, pierced towards Doggy's chest with a hissing sound. When Doggy saw the spear, he already had no strength to dodge it. Chapter 9. Looking at the spear that was about to pierce his heart, Doggy felt a chill run up from the bottom of his feet to the top of his head, his whole body stiffened. A villager at the side looked over. 2 burly men roared as they charged over. But those bird barbarians were crazily killing the villagers, how could they reach them in such a short time? Even if there was no one to stop them, they were too far away and would not be able to save Doggy in time. Wu Qi moved. Just when the spear was 3 inches away from Doggy's heart, his body suddenly shot out like a bullet and threw himself into the chest of the barbarian. The prickle in his hand went deep into the barbarian's chest, piercing through his body. His left hand casually slapped on the spear, the innate water energy brought up a whirling force and crushed the 1-foot-long spear into pieces. The token of the underhand sect leader was forged by the mysterious man who passed the scroll of stealing to Wu Qi using an innate water energy stone. It contained a thread of innate water element energy. Therefore, when Wu Qi was cultivating the scroll of stealing 7 foundation establishment technique, he had to cultivate the water chapter first. Innate water was extremely soft and gentle, but it could also be extremely hard and strong. The soft part of it was unbreakable in the world, the hard part could break everything in the world. Just like the vast ocean, no matter how hard you hit it, no matter how hard you hit it, no matter how hard you hit it, no matter how hard you hit it. But once the ocean rolled up into a tsunami, the surging waves could destroy a city, destroy a country, and sweep away a mountain as easily as turning one's hand. Just like how a drop of water could pierce through a stone, water could turn into an iceberg, it could still crush everything under the iceberg into pieces. Just now, when Wu Qi struck with his palm, the innate water energy brought up a whirlpool force, even a piece of pig iron would be crushed into pieces, let alone these barbarian spears made from tree vines. Although these tree vines were extremely tough, they couldn't withstand a single strike from Wu Qi. When the poisonous prickle entered the bird barbarian's body, its body trembled, dirty blood sprayed out from its 7 apertures, and its body suddenly shrunk into a lump of meat. Pulling out the prickle, Wu Qi shouted at the dumbfounded Doggy, "If you don't want to die, pick up your sword and fight with them." Doggy stared blankly for a moment, then abruptly grabbed his long sword, howling as he swung his sword forward randomly. The sword nearly missed Wu Qi. But luckily, he pulled his neck back, and the tip of the sword brushed past his scalp. The violent sword swept up a whirlwind and left a bloody mark on Wu Qi's scalp. Son of a bitch. Wu Qi cursed angrily, only to hear a loud sound. A bird barbarian who had just raised his spear to stab Wu Qi was sent flying by Doggy's sword. These bird barbarians were short in stature and did not have much strength. They were only nimble. Facing Doggy's frightening strength, the savage could only let out a miserable howl. His long spear was cut in half by the sword, and he himself was sent flying dozens of feet away. Kill the barbarians, kill the barbarians, kill the barbarians. Just as Wu Qi and Doggy settled their own problems, a few elders of the Meng village had gathered together and started shouting. At that moment, the response was like thunder. Thousands of strong men and thousands of healthy women responded at the same time. The roar of "Kill the barbarians" shook the river water. Leaving a few hundred villagers to kill the bird barbarians, the rest of the villagers held their weapons tightly and rushed towards the drawbridge. There were already a few hundred barbarians rushing across the drawbridge while screaming, and they were rushing towards the village. If they couldn't stop them near the drawbridge, once all the barbarians rushed into the village, even if they could kill them in the end, the Meng village would be finished. Two elders took the lead, bringing the villagers and rushing towards the drawbridge. Although the two elders were so old that they couldn't even straighten their backs, their strength wasn't any weaker than those young villagers. Moreover, their moves were more ruthless and sinister. Every single move was aimed at the vital points of those barbarians. Two canes swirled up a black gust of wind as the two elders rushed to the bridgehead while yelling. Wherever they went, dozens of barbarians were killed on the spot by their canes. They were like two crazy tigers, leading a group of tiger cubs to crazily kill anyone who tried to stop them. Those barbarians did not want to be outdone. They also shouted for a bloody battle, and with their eyes bloodshot, they started fighting with the villagers of Meng village. The villagers of Meng village wanted to drive the barbarians back to the bridge, but the barbarians wanted to guard the drawbridge, not letting the villagers get close to them. They just wanted more of their companions to rush into the village and start killing. Both sides were fighting at the drawbridge, and in the blink of an eye, dozens of villagers were killed by each other. Blood and minced meat were scattered all over the ground. Suddenly, the leader of the barbarians who was standing on the other side of the river let out a weird laugh. He pulled out a bone blade, chopped off his own little finger, and stuffed it into the mouth of the green skeleton next to him. The small skeleton started chewing on the finger, and its body suddenly expanded. With a weird cry, the enlarged skull opened its mouth, and in one breath, dozens of green fireballs were shot out. The fireballs flew across the river at high speed, and they hit the villagers of Meng village. The two elders screamed out, "Oh no!" Dozens of fireballs exploded at the same time. Hundreds of men from Meng village were engulfed by the flame, and in just a few breaths' time, they were all burned to ashes. The people of Meng village were in a mess. More and more barbarians had crossed the bridge, and they were shouting and shouting happily. They raised their blades and swords, and as if they were chopping vegetables, they started slaughtering the people of Meng village. A sharp scream came from the sky. The village women who were caught by the eagles were suddenly thrown down from the sky. In just 2 to 3 breaths' time, over 300 village women had fallen to the ground, and they had turned into meat paste. Dozens of village women were thrown into the crowd of Meng village, and they even killed and injured dozens of villagers who didn't have enough time to dodge. Wu Qi's eyes widened in fear when he saw this. Without saying a word, he left Doggy behind, and with the prickle in his hand, he dashed towards those bird barbarians. The prickle kept stabbing, stabbing, stabbing at the fastest speed possible. One after another, bird barbarians were screaming and screaming as their throats were pierced by Wu Qi, and the prickle pierced through their chests. All of them fell to the ground and died. A few bird barbarians' leaders saw the movement of Wu Qi's stabbing, and they tried their best to block the prickle with their spears. But when the prickle, which was infused with innate water energy, touched the spears. The spears were like a small boat that had fallen into a whirlpool, and they couldn't control themselves and were pushed to the side. The prickle didn't seem to be blocked at all, and it easily pierced through the bodies of these bird barbarians. With his body slightly leaning forward, the energy in both of his arms was boiling. When Wu Qi waved his arms, a faint sound of water waves could be heard. He was like a flood that had broken through a dam, and he rushed through the crowd of bird barbarians. In just the time of 3 to 5 breaths, Wu Qi had killed 37 bird barbarians with a frightening speed. The surrounding Meng villagers cheered at the same time. Dozens of men from Meng village followed closely behind Wu Qi, helping him kill these bird barbarians. Swinging their blades and swords randomly, those bird barbarians who were dizzy from Wu Qi's crazy stabbing screamed in pain. In just a blink of an eye, another 100 bird barbarians had fallen to the ground and died. The rest of the bird barbarians screamed out in fear, and they kept letting out sharp eagle cries. Nearly 100 eagles in the sky quickly dove down, trying to help these bird barbarians retreat. The barbarian leader on the other side of the river roared out angrily, and he was cursing these unreliable bird barbarians. But in just a blink of an eye, this barbarian leader started laughing crazily again. Because of the fireball attack from before, more than 700 barbarians had crossed the suspension bridge, and they had entered the Meng village. The villagers of Meng village were retreating, and the barbarians were about to break through their defensive line. The barbarian leader took a deep breath. Blood flowed out of his 7 orifices, especially his left hand where his fingers were cut off. Blood was gushing out like a fountain. In order to activate the green skull, the barbarian leader had paid a huge price. Seeing that his tribesmen had gained the upper hand, the barbarian leader shouted for a while, and finally, he lost all his energy and sat down on the ground. While panting, the barbarian leader roared out, "Leave me 10 of the most beautiful women. Whoever dares to steal them, I'll castrate him." The dozens of guards beside the barbarian leader, Chi-Chi, glanced at their leader, and they couldn't help but take a few steps towards the pontoon bridge. The barbarian leader rolled his eyes, and he quickly ordered, "Go to the village, keep an eye on those bastards. 10 of the most beautiful women, mine. The most beautiful linen, mine. The best porcelain, mine. 10 of the most tender children, mine. Go, don't let them rob us." These guards cheered, and they couldn't wait any longer. They rushed towards the pontoon bridge. Saliva dripped down from the corner of the barbarian leader's mouth. He stared at the direction of the Meng village, and with a silly smile, he said, "Beautiful women." From the forest behind him, an iron crossbow shot out, and it hit the back of the barbarian leader's head, piercing through his skull. A glowing talisman flashed on the tip of the crossbow, and with a bang, half of the barbarian leader's body exploded into pieces. When the barbarian leader died, the black smoke and green skull that were circling around him let out a shrill scream, and they flew up into the sky. A 6-inch-long talisman darted out from the woods, and stuck on the pale green skeleton's body with great accuracy. A faint white light flashed, and the pale green skeleton fell to the ground with a groan. It fell heavily on the ground and could no longer move. A group of nearly 100 strong men rushed out from the forest. The leader was a muscular man who was wearing a leather armor, and he was holding a 9-rings broadsword in his hand. This man was over 8 feet tall, and his waist was around 6 feet in circumference. His entire body was pitch black and full of protruding lumps of flesh. He waved the broadsword and shouted towards the sky, "Brothers, kill the barbarians, kill the barbarians." The mayor's latest offer, 1 barbarian's head, 100 coins. Nearly 100 strong men shouted at the same time, "Kill the barbarians, kill the barbarians." Following the loud shout of killing the barbarians, these men rushed to the other side of the pontoon bridge, and they stood in 3 horizontal lines. Chi-Chi pulled out the heavy crossbow from his back, and sealed off the pontoon bridge. There were already about 1,000 barbarians rushing into the Meng village, and the rest of the barbarians were still crowded on the pontoon bridge. From time to time, some barbarians would be pushed into the river by their companions, and they would become the food of the river fishes. These barbarians couldn't wait to rush into the Meng village, and they wanted to kill and loot. How could they care about their kinship? They just kept squeezing and bumping into each other, and like a fish in a can, they filled up the pontoon bridge. The water might not be able to pass through, but the crossbow could. The power of the crossbow used by the group of men who rushed out from the forest was terrifying. Only with a peng-peng sound could be heard, and dozens of crossbow bolts would be shot out at the same time. Each of the crossbow bolts would pierce through the barbarian's body, and each bolt would have to pierce through at least 3 to 5 barbarians' bodies before its power would be depleted. These men then used a 3-stage cycle shooting method, 1 row shooting, 1 row preparing, and 1 row reloading the crossbow. The crossbow bolts didn't stop shooting, and in the blink of an eye, half of the barbarians on the pontoon bridge were killed. When the river fishes were about to tear apart the dead bodies of the barbarians who fell from the bridge, the leader quickly took out a big bag of powder from his bag and sprinkled it into the river. A pungent smell spread out, and the river fishes in the river quickly turned around and left. How could they dare to stay here any longer? The leader laughed wildly and said, "1 barbarian's head is worth 100 coins, how could I let you eat it like this? Brothers, let's kill the barbarians. When we get back to the city, let's find some girls and have some fun. Ha, we're going to make a fortune this time." The vigorous men all laughed and cheered in unison. They kept laughing, but their hands were not messed up. One by one, they reloaded the crossbow and shot the crossbow in an orderly manner. Step by step, they walked onto the pontoon bridge, mercilessly harvesting the lives of those barbarians. These pitiful savages were squeezed into a ball on the pontoon bridge. They didn't even have a place to dodge. Under the volley of crossbow bolts with astonishing penetrative power, hundreds of savages were wiped out in the short time it took to drink a cup of tea. The village elders cheered together, "The barbarian hunters are here. Boys, let's kill the barbarians." The people of Meng village were cheering loudly, and Chi-Chi's expression changed. Chapter 10. When the sound of "kill the barbarians" was heard, Wu Qi was in a state of joy. When he killed those bird barbarians, Wu Qi's right hand pierced the prickles into their bodies, and his left hand pressed on their bodies out of habit. The secret skill of the underhand sect, which was also the basic skill of the scroll of stealing, was used together with the great hand of web and little picking star palm. In addition to the invisible whirlpool formed by the innate water energy in his arm, when his palm pressed on these barbarians' bodies, a thread of blood that could not be seen by naked eyes would spurt out. Wu Qi could only feel his palm warm up, a stream of blood that could make his whole body energized suddenly flowed into his body. His body, which was injured by Shengguan Ye's disciples and was crushed in the great universal dimensional portal, was like a seedling that suddenly saw rain after a long drought, greedily absorbed the heat. Suddenly, Wu Qi's weak and feeble body recovered a lot, and his strength had increased to a whole new level. The scroll of stealing, the scroll of stealing. Taking everything in the world to make up for one's inadequacies, taking without asking is stealing. With the 7 stealing heaven meridians as the foundation, cultivating yin, yang, metal, wood, water, fire and earth, 7 skills, one could contain the heavens and steal anything in the world. The so-called 7 stealing heaven meridians were the 7 extra meridians that corresponded to the 7 elements of yin, yang, metal, wood, water, fire and earth. Wu Qi had the 7 stealing heaven meridians, that was the reason why he inherited the scroll of stealing. Now, with the help of the underhand sect leader's token, he had cultivated the source of water chapter, and mastered the innate water spirit. With this, he could steal all the spirit qi in the world that originated from the source of water. The human body contained a large amount of water, the main component of a human's blood was also water, and most of the human's essence, qi, and spirit were stored in the blood. Therefore, when he pressed on the bird barbarian's body with the great hand of web, the whirlpool in his palm absorbed and purified a part of the barbarian's blood and qi essence. Then, he used the little star-picking hand to pluck and guide, and this part of the blood qi essence naturally entered his body. This tiny bit of blood and qi essence came from the blood of the barbarians, and its foundation was water. Therefore, it was easily digested by the innate water energy, fusing into Wu Qi's body without any hindrance, and became a part of his spirit, energy, and soul. Because Wu Qi's cultivation was not high, the blood and qi essence that he stole was only 1,000th of a normal person's blood and qi. Because Wu Qi's cultivation was not high, the blood and qi essence that he stole was only 1,000th of a normal person's blood and qi. The natural energy in this mountain range was very rich, and the blood and energy of an ordinary savage was at least 10 times stronger than that of a human on Earth. The total amount of blood and energy Wu Qi had stolen was roughly equal to what he had. In just a few breaths of time, the strength of Wu Qi's energy and blood had been doubled. Wu Qi felt warm all over his body, a huge amount of essence was circulating in his body, Wu Qi's internal injuries were quickly healed. The blood and qi essence that he stole slowly settled in Wu Qi's blood vessels, tendons and bones, gradually becoming part of Wu Qi's body. In just a short period of time, the foundation of Wu Qi's blood and energy had been doubled, and the energy and nutrients carried by his blood, as well as the ability of his blood to regenerate, had also been doubled. Wu Qi's fair skin had a faint redness, the blood in his body was surging, there seemed to be an extremely strong force in his body that wanted to be released, it just wanted to fight with someone. Taking a deep breath, a section of the cultivation technique of the scroll of stealing flashed across Wu Qi's mind at lightning speed. With his current body foundation, although he possessed the 7 stealing heaven meridians, but except for his arms, the other parts of his body were not the best choice. Doubling the foundation of his blood and qi was already his limit. He had to wait until his body had completely digested and settled this foreign blood essence, only then could he use the scroll of stealing again. Take the surplus of everything in the world, make up for the deficiency in the body. If he made up for it too much, he might end up bursting to death, this was the consequence of being greedy. Clenching his left fist tightly, fearing that he might use the hand of web and picking star's palm again, Wu Qi placed his left hand behind his back, holding the prickle in his right hand, his face was as red as blood, he let out a long cry and rushed towards those bird barbarians who had already lost their formation. The prickle swept across the sky like lightning, the sound of wind breaking kept ringing out, one after another bird barbarians fell to the ground, blood spurting out from their 7 apertures, their bodies shrunk to the size of a baby. Black dirty blood sprayed on the ground was filled with a rotten stench. Using the innate water energy in his eyes, Wu Qi's eyes were once again covered with a layer of faint watery glow. Wherever his eyes passed, the blood flow in the bird barbarians' bodies could be seen clearly, all the bird barbarians' bodies were covered with a layer of faint blood glow. The place where the blood glow was the strongest was the place where the body of these bird barbarians was the strongest, and the place where the blood glow was the weakest was naturally the place where their body was the weakest. All Wu Qi needed to do was to poke the spot where the blood glow was the weakest, and that spot was the weakest spot of these bird barbarians. In a blink of an eye, another dozens of bird barbarians had fallen under Wu Qi's prickle. The eagles swooping down from the sky let out a sharp cry, 3 of them swooped towards Wu Qi's direction, 6 eagle claws swung down from the sky, grabbing towards the top of Wu Qi's head at the same time. Letting out a long laugh, Wu Qi pushed out his left hand, a soft but tough whirlpool-like force was unleashed. The 6 eagle claws spun in the whirlpool-like force, and suddenly, they strangely clasped together. The 3 eagles let out hurried wails. Their claws clenched into a ball, and their bodies suddenly lost their balance. They fluttered their wings and fell to the ground in a sorry state. The prickle flashed past, without hesitation, Wu Qi used the prickle and pierced through the neck of the 3 eagles. The villagers of Meng village cheered together, Doggy, who was following closely behind Wu Qi, happily swung his sword and chopped off the heads of the 3 eagles. The rest of the villagers rushed forward, beating the remaining bird barbarians and forcing them to flee in all directions, completely losing their ability to fight back. The bird barbarians no longer had the heart to fight, they kept letting out sharp cries, hoping that the eagles in the sky would come down and save them. Suddenly, the sound of "Kill the Barbarians" was heard, the group of barbarian hunters had lined up in a neat formation, using their powerful crossbows to seal off the barbarians' retreat. The villagers of Meng village and the barbarian hunters flanked the barbarians from the front and the back, gradually causing the barbarians to panic. The terrain of Meng village was extremely disadvantageous to the barbarians. There was a big river in front of them, and behind them was a huge mountain that was impossible to pass through. Once the only path was occupied by the barbarian hunters. Unless the barbarian hunters and the villagers of Meng village were killed, there was no way for the barbarian hunters to escape. The villagers of Meng village were fine, except for the two elders who were stronger than the rest of the villagers. The strength of the rest of the villagers was almost the same as the barbarian hunters. But those barbarian hunters, they were professional rangers, a semi-military armed team. Their strength was much stronger than ordinary people. Standing at the end of the drawbridge, except for a group of 20 strong men who had sealed off the drawbridge with their crossbows, the rest of the barbarian hunters had already thrown away their crossbows and joined the battle with their swords and blades, working together with the villagers of Meng village to kill those barbarians who were screaming and panicking. This was especially true for the burly man who was leading the group. He was holding an 8 feet long 9 rings machete, and the saber beams were flying everywhere like a waterfall. Occasionally, he would let out a loud shout, and a 3-inch long saber beam would shoot out from the tip of the saber. Wherever he went, the blades of the barbarian hunters would be broken. None of them could block his blade. The rest of the barbarian hunters were also brave. No matter if it was the leather armor they were wearing or the weapons they were holding, they were much better than the weapons used by the villagers and the barbarian hunters. Their defense and lethality were amazing. These barbarian hunters all had strong inner force. They were even stronger than the strongest men of Meng village, but in front of them, none of the barbarian hunters could withstand their blades. With just a group of nearly 100 barbarian hunters, they had turned the tide of the battle. The villagers of Meng village were cheering, and together with the barbarian hunters, they surrounded the barbarian hunters and started killing them. In the blink of an eye, more than half of the barbarian hunters had been killed. The eagles in the sky were screaming in sorrow. They were stubbornly swooping down to the ground, trying to save those bird barbarians. But the crossbows in the hands of the barbarian hunters were too much of a threat to them. Dozens of eagles were hit by the crossbows and fell to the ground. How could they dare to fly back to the ground? Wu Qi was getting excited. He was holding the prickle tightly. He was about to join the battle and kill this group of barbarian hunters. All of a sudden, the blood in his body surged, and his face turned so red that it looked like blood was going to drip out. Wu Qi was shocked. He quickly threw away the prickle, sat on the ground with his legs crossed, and started meditating. He had suddenly stolen the blood essence that was equal to the total amount of his blood essence. If he were to sleep for 2 to 3 days, this blood essence would have completely settled down. But he was absorbing it during the battle, and he was fighting with all his might at the same time. The blood essence of a human being would become more and more surging once he exercised. Right now, the blood in his body was surging, and his blood vessels were about to burst. Silently exercising the mystic technique found in Scroll of Stealing, Wu Qi circulated all the blood and energies in his body, slowly merging them into his bone marrow and tendons. After spending a full 15 minutes, he had finally completely transformed this blood and energies essence into his own. At this moment, if one could break open Wu Qi's bones and examine his bone marrow, one would find out that his bone marrow had become extremely thick and dense, different from an ordinary person. Furthermore, the vitality of the bone marrow was extremely strong, and the color of the newly born blood was exceptionally red, containing a very strong life force. The blood on his face gradually faded away. Wu Qi took a deep breath, followed by a muffled exhalation that sounded like a cow's roar coming from his chest. 2 streams of scorching hot white airflow were slowly exhaled from his nostrils, shooting over 10 feet away. The blood in his body was flowing joyfully, as if there was an extremely strong force hidden within his body. Every movement he made was much easier than usual. Especially, it seemed like he had received a sufficient amount of nourishment from the blood essence. Wu Qi felt his eyes were bright and clear, and his mind had become much sharper. Blood essence was the foundation of a human spirit, qi, and spirit. When the blood essence was strengthened, the spirit, qi, and spirit would also gradually become stronger. The benefits Wu Qi obtained from those bird barbarians today, if it were those orthodox Qi cultivators or cultivators, perhaps it would take them several dozens of years of arduous cultivation before they could improve their blood and energy to this level. The way of the heaven and earth, when others have more than they have, I have less than they have, so I take what others have and make up for myself. Wu Qi suddenly had a deeper understanding of the scroll of stealing. Too bad that the token of the underhand sect was made from a piece of innate water stone. Wu Qi could only hope that he would be lucky enough to find an innate spirit object of gold, wood, fire, and earth element, which would allow him to successfully cultivate the other 4 original chapters. As for the yin and yang element energy stone, Wu Qi did not have much hope for it, as it was a treasure that could only be found by luck. The scroll of stealing had so many benefits, but the prerequisites for cultivating it were also a headache. While Wu Qi was in a daze, the heads of the 2 barbarians flew up into the sky, and the barbarian leader, who was holding the 9 rings broadsword, had already arrived in front of Wu Qi. Wu Qi's eyes focused, he quickly stood up, cupped his fist and bowed to the man. "Brother, I, Wu Qi, am pleased to meet you." After panting for a while, the man sized up Wu Qi, and suddenly grinned. "We're all brothers in the martial world, please don't mention it." Chapter 11. In the middle of the night, in the Meng village, cries could be heard. In the battle during the day, nearly 2,000 barbarians were killed, and the 3 barbarian tribes had lost at least half of their young men. But the Meng village also suffered a great loss. Although they had the help of barbarian hunters who came to supply them, more than 700 villagers were killed, and half of them were men and half were men. Almost every family in the Meng village had someone killed by the barbarians. Every family was mourning, every family was crying. Tonight, the Meng village sent chills down everyone's spine. Wu Qi was sitting on a branch of a big tree with his arms crossed in front of his chest, looking at the suspension bridge not far away. A few barbarian hunters were chopping wood with big axes in their hands, helping the villagers of Meng village repair the broken arrow tower and suspension bridge. They were working hard, and their efficiency was high. The arrow tower that was blown up during the day had almost been repaired. Meng village was the only supply point for the people who entered and exited the Little Meng Mountain. It didn't matter if it was picking herbs or hunting in Little Meng Mountain, or if it was a group of professional barbarian hunters who were looking for trouble with the barbarians and barbarians living in the mountain. When they were entering and exiting the mountain, they would rest in Meng village and replenish their supplies. Therefore, Meng village had a good relationship with those herb gatherers, hunters, and barbarian hunters, but their relationship with those barbarians was extremely bad. Normally, Meng village would be harassed by those barbarians a few times a year, but it had never been like today, where 3 barbarian tribes joined hands and attacked Meng village. Especially those bird barbarians, their tribe was at least 700 to 800 miles away from Meng village. No one knew why they came so far to cause trouble for Meng village. In short, Meng village had suffered a great loss this time. Even Doggy's father, the man who brought Wu Qi back to Meng village from the forest, was killed by the strange fireball unleashed by the barbarian leader. Sighing, Wu Qi raised his head and looked at the starry sky, mumbling to himself, "Living is not easy. But, I have to work hard to survive." A weird laughter came from afar. The leader of the barbarian hunters, Zhang Hu, who was holding a splashing wind 9 rings machete, was walking towards Ji Hao with big steps while carrying a wine bag. He threw the wine bag, which was the size of 2 bull heads, towards Wu Qi, grinned and said, "You're right, brother Wu Qi. It is very difficult for a man to live in this world. But, we are all men, we have to survive, right?" Catching the wine bag, Wu Qi frowned and drank 2 mouthfuls of the strong liquor. Spicy and pungent, of the high alcohol content of the wine, the taste was terrible. The wine was also mixed with unknown herbal medicine, which had the effect of promoting blood circulation, driving away coldness, and expelling trace amounts of toxins, but it made the wine taste more like poison. Wu Qi straightened his neck and gulped down 2 mouthfuls of wine, then he threw the wine pouch back to Zhang Hu, who was standing under the tree. He forced a smile and asked, "Brother Zhang Hu, where did you come from?" Grabbing the wine bag and gulping it down, Zhang Hu let out a satisfied burp and said, I just came out from the mountains, and I'm going back to Little Meng City to have some fun. The brothers have worked hard in the mountains for half a year, and the harvest this time is not bad. Letting out a sigh, Zhang Hu looked at the Meng village, where the lights were flickering, and said with a bitter smile, but this time, the Meng village, Wu Qi didn't say anything. He just crossed his arms and quietly listened to Zhang Hu's monologue. But, fortunately, Doggy and the others are almost adults. At least, Meng village wouldn't go into a decline again. Sigh, a few years ago, we had submitted a petition to the mayor, asking him to send a group of city guards to the Meng village, but the mayor would never agree. Wu Qi lowered his head and quickly analyzed the information in Zhang Hu's words. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps came from afar. Wu Qi, who was sitting on a high spot, saw a girl from the village sneaking out of the village with a strong barbarian hunter, and they went to a bush at the edge of the village. Not long after, the wild grass began to sway rhythmically. Zhang Hu lowered his voice and laughed. Brother Wu Qi, let's keep our voices down, we don't want to disturb them. Wu Qi looked at the bush and nodded his head thoughtfully. He had seen that girl during the day. Her husband was killed in a fight during the day, and she was the only daughter left at home. Now, she sneaked out in the middle of the night and made love with these barbarian hunters. These barbarian hunters were all strong men, and their skills were much stronger than the villagers. If they could give birth to a boy through their bodies, they could support the family and continue the family line. The people in the forest respected the strong, so it was better to borrow the seeds from these barbarian hunters than to find a target from the village. Nodding his head, Wu Qi quietly slid down from the tree branch and came to Zhang Hu's side. He leaned against the tree and sat on the ground. Big brother Zhang Hu, I've been learning from my teacher for 10 years, and this is the first time I've gone out for a walk, and I've met with an accident. I wonder how the world outside of the forest has changed. After making up a fake identity for himself, Wu Qi started to gather information about the world outside of the forest. He didn't plan to stay in Meng village any longer. The world here was too small, and it wouldn't bring any benefits to Wu Qi. The skills in Scroll of Stealing allowed him to take what he needed from the world to make up for what he lacked. Meng village was just a small place, so how many benefits could it give to Wu Qi? Even if he took all the underwear of every man, woman, and child in Meng village, he still wouldn't give any benefits to Wu Qi. Only when he walked out of this forest and went to the outside world would he have more opportunities, and only then would he have the opportunity to become stronger. But, what did it look like outside of the forest? The people of Meng village rarely left the forest. Even if they did, they would only take a stroll around Little Meng City. They didn't have all the information that Wu Qi needed. Zhang Hu gulped down 2 mouthfuls of strong liquor and smacked his lips. What else can it look like? The Great Yan dynasty, the suzerains of all vassal states, still doesn't care about what's happening below them. All the vassal states are fighting each other, and they are having a great time. All the rich and powerful families of the vassal states are tricking each other, and they are having a hard time. The young masters of the families are trying to set each other up, and they are trying to set each other up. Twisting his mouth in disdain, Zhang Hu snorted and said, but, Little Meng City is located in a remote area, so we can still make a living. Patting on Wu Qi's shoulder, Zhang Hu sighed and said, Brother Wu Qi, listen to Big Brother's advice. The outside of the forest and the inside of the forest are 2 different things. Back then, Big Brother, you were ambitious, and you focused on a rich future. After working hard for 20 years, you finally achieved something, but 3 years ago, you were forced to run away to Little Meng City to live your life. Wu Qi looked at Zhang Hu and smiled, alright, I'll listen to Big Brother Zhang Hu. If Wu Qi can't survive in the outside world, I'll come back and spend my days hunting barbarians with you. Clicking his tongue, Zhang Hu shook his head disapprovingly. He had decided that Wu Qi was a newbie who had just left the forest, and he only wanted to spread his wings and fly. He had never considered his own strength, and whether he could fly in the world outside of the forest. Zhang Hu had seen a lot of newbies like this in the past. Shaking his head, Zhang Hu hesitantly asked, then, I wish you all the best. But, Brother Wuqi, I saw you kill so many bird barbarians during the day, your cultivation level is not low. You, your teacher, and your fellow disciples, how could they be? Ah. Wuqi hit the ground with both of his hands. After a long time, he said in a low, hoarse voice, I didn't see what it was. We were walking, and I saw a flash of lightning, and then I fainted. Zhang Hu seemed to have thought of something, and he gasped. After a moment of silence, Zhang Hu smiled bitterly and said, that was an unexpected disaster. I can only say that you guys have bad luck, and met the most unreasonable cultivator. I'm afraid you guys had disturbed him, and that's why he killed you. Wuqi nodded his head, and didn't say anything. He snatched Zhang Hu's wine pouch, and in one breath, he poured half of the wine pouch into his stomach. Zhang Hu opened his mouth, trying to persuade Wuqi, but he just shook his head and let out a heavy sigh. Both of them drank from the pouch, and in the blink of an eye, they had finished all the hard liquor in the pouch. Wuqi had the innate water energy to protect his body, so when the hard liquor entered his stomach, it was dissolved into wisps of hot air and circulated around his body, so he didn't feel drunk at all. Zhang Hu, on the other hand, was about 70 to 80% drunk. He fell on the ground, and suddenly let out a hollow laugh. 3 years ago, I, Zhang Hu, was still a general, with a cultivation level of the peak of the Hotian level. I accidentally offended a cultivator from a wealthy family, and as a result, I was forced to give up everything and escape to a desolate place like Little Meng City. This is my fate, these cultivators, why are they so strong? Wuqi listened attentively to Zhang Hu's self-pity, trying to get more valuable information from him. Suddenly, he heard a series of hoofbeats coming from the woods across the river, and a long line of torches was walking toward him. The barbarian hunters who were repairing the suspension bridge at the end of the bridge let out a rapid alarm, and a large group of angry villagers immediately rushed out from the Meng village. Not long after that, a large group of cavalry suddenly appeared on the other side of the river. They were all wearing the same black clothes and black armors, riding on horses that looked like neither horses nor deers, and their bodies were covered with gold and green patterns, looking very majestic. These horses were restlessly stomping their hooves, and when their hooves collided with the rocks on the ground, a large amount of fire sparks were produced. A deep and powerful voice came from the other side of the river. Where are the elders of Meng village? We are from the 3rd Battalion of the Heaven Guards of Little Meng City, and we were ordered to station in Meng village. Zhang Hu, who was drunk, shouted out in surprise, "Io! That damn stingy mayor, how could he be willing to station the city guards in Meng village? Didn't he keep saying that the taxes were not enough, and that he couldn't afford the extra military expenses?" Shaking his head, Zhang Hu frowned and said, "Even if he wants to station the soldiers in Meng village, can't they just come during the day? Little Meng City is only 500 miles away from here, and a swift horse can travel 2,000 miles in a day. They can reach Meng village in 4 hours, why would they need to travel at night? Looks like, Wuqi asked in a low voice, "What do you mean by looks like? Big brother Zhang Hu?" Zhang Hu twisted his lips and murmured, "Looks like there's a high official coming, and the mayor is sending the soldiers out to show his face." While both of them were murmuring, the suspension bridge had been lowered slowly. There were a total of 500 elite soldiers in the 3rd Heavenly Guard Battalion of Little Meng City. Each of them was over 8 feet tall, strong and muscular. They looked even more valiant and courageous than those villagers from Meng village. Especially the armors and weapons they were wearing, they were of the highest quality, and even Zhang Hu was jealous of them. When this group of elite soldiers slowly entered the village, the villagers of Meng village couldn't help but let out a cheer. The sad atmosphere of the village had been washed away by quite a bit. With these 500 elite soldiers stationed in Little Meng City, and with the natural advantage of Meng village, unless it was attacked by more than 4,000 barbarians, Meng village would be safe. Wuqi couldn't help but nod his head. With this team of soldiers stationed here, he could leave Meng village with a peace of mind. It was time for him to enter this world. Chapter 12. The chariots rumbled, and the horses neighed. The sky was clear and blue, without a single cloud in sight. 2 eagles were hovering in the sky. They looked like flies embedded in amber, their bodies not moving at all. Only a few sharp and long cries could be heard occasionally, showing that they were still alive. It had just rained a few days ago, and the road leading to Little Meng City was covered with a thick layer of mud. Although the weather had been fine for the past 2 days, the mud hadn't dried up yet. The wheels of the chariots and the hooves of the horses had sunk into the soft mud, and every inch they moved forward required a lot of strength. The strong sunlight was baking the mud, and the air was filled with a strange smell that made people want to vomit. All kinds of rotten smells were being scorched by the sun, like rotten meat fermenting in a wine jar. The sticky smell seemed to be drilling into the body through the pores of the people, making them feel unbearably uncomfortable. A group of 200 riders were escorting 7 gold-plated chariots, moving slowly on the muddy road with difficulty. Occasionally, the hooves of a few mounts would slip and stagger a few steps to the side, which would always lead to the angry accusations and curses of the knights on their backs. Some bad-tempered knights would even whip their mounts. All 7 of the chariots were luxurious. The 6 leading chariots were all 4-wheeled carriages, pulled by 4 snow-white horses. But the biggest chariot at the back didn't have any wheels. The entire chariot was floating 3 feet above the ground, pulled by 4 strong black rhinoceroses. The 4 rhinoceroses were different species, their black skin was dotted with green spots, and the 3 curved horns on their heads were glowing with a silvery white light, making them look majestic and magical. The interior of this floating chariot was luxuriously furnished. It was like a spacious bedroom. There was a soft couch, a long table, 2 bookshelves, 4 bronze incense burners placed at the corner of the chariot, and a thick carpet and all kinds of exquisite furnishings. Although they were on a journey, it was still an extremely luxurious experience. Lu Qingfeng was sitting behind the long table with disheveled hair, trying his best to open his sleepy eyes, staring at the lower-tier magical treasure, the little 25th lamp. The fist-sized spirit lamp made of purple gold was shaped like a toad. It opened its mouth slightly and spat out a strand of red flame that was as thin as a strand of hair. A small ball of silver essence the size of a soybean was floating in the flame and slowly melting. Although this silver essence was small, it was refined by 300 kilograms of silver by Lu Qingfeng, and it contained a thread of Western Grand White Gold energy. Because of the difference between the grade of silver and Lu Qingfeng's cultivation level, the Grand White Gold essence energy contained in the silver marrow was very weak, very thin, and of a very low grade. However, it was still the Grand White Gold essence energy. The lower-tier magical treasure, the little 25th spirit lamp, was a treasure that Lu Qingfeng had spent all his wealth to obtain. As long as a fire element spirit stone was inserted into the lamp, it would be able to shoot out a thread of Shaoyang true fire. Of course, if one's cultivation level was high enough, he could also use his own energy to ignite the lamp, but Lu Qingfeng's cultivation level was obviously not at that level. The power of the flame ignited by the spirit stone was not strong, and it was extremely unstable. This silver essence had been smelted for 14 hours, but only 99% of it had been melted. The last thread of the essence that contained the grand white energy could not be completely melted. Forcing his eyes to open, Lu Qingfeng clenched his teeth and made a seal with both hands. Then, he bit his teeth and spat out a mouthful of blood essence towards the lamp. Along with a whistling sound, the flame on the spirit lamp abruptly grew stronger, from the hair-thin flame to the size of a matchstick. The silver essence floating in the flame suddenly melted, turning into a translucent ball of silver liquid. Lu Qingfeng was overjoyed. He quickly grabbed a triangular stone pillar that was as thick as a baby's arm, and with his right hand, he carefully grabbed a pair of forceps made of purple gold. Then, he used the forceps to pick, pull the silver liquid. An extremely thin silver thread was pulled out from the liquid, and the shiny silver thread floated in the air like a phantom. Lu Qingfeng did not dare to be negligent. He hastily pulled the silver thread and embedded it into the patterns that were already carved on the stone pillar. He worked in a flurry, using the forceps to pull, and point. The 3 simple golden dagger-shaped talismans on the stone pillar and the 12 talisman tails that connected the talismans were gradually filled up by the silver light. Because of the lack of proficiency, the silver thread was interrupted 3 times during the embedding process, causing the talismans and talisman tails to have some flaws. But everything went smoothly. The talisman array on the stone pillar was finally completed, and it did not become a useless array. After embedding 3 green bean-sized spirit stones into the core of the golden dagger-shaped talisman with the silver thread, Lu Qingfeng threw away the forceps, held the stone pillar with both hands, and murmured a few incantations. He slowly injected his energy into the stone pillar, triggering the magical power contained in the talisman. The stone pillar was carved with a low-grade earth elemental stone, which contained a powerful earth elemental energy. After carving the metal elemental talisman and activating the talisman array with the earth elemental spirit stones, it was successfully made into an array pillar for the grand white gold dagger array. The grand white gold dagger array was a metal elemental array. Using the earth elemental stone pillar as the foundation, and using the principle that earth begets metal, triggering the grand white gold essence energy in the silver essence, turning it into a golden dagger to attack the enemy. This was an entry-level array used by low-grade cultivators to protect their abodes and themselves. With Lu Qingfeng's cultivation level at the peak of the Hotian realm, it was not easy for him to create the grand white gold dagger array and gather all the materials needed to create it. Laughing out loud, Lu Qingfeng took out 2 identical array pillars from the lowest grade storage bag. He stared at the 3 array pillars in his hand, which were glowing with a faint silver light, and threw himself back onto the couch. Hey, I'm the general of Little Meng City. This is a city that is attacked by barbarians every 2 to 3 years. Basically, a batch of officials will die every 3 to 8 years. Sending me, an eyesore, to this place, is it because you want me to live and die on my own? Laughing at himself, Lu Qingfeng held the 3 array pillars tightly in his hand. Suddenly, a crazy look flashed across his eyes. But I'm not willing to give up. I, Lu Qingfeng, will not die here. Sooner or later, I will return to the Lu family in Liang with my head held high, and let you bastards know who I am, Lu Qingfeng, am. Clenching his fists tightly, Lu Qingfeng was like a wounded tiger, letting out a deep roar. The soundproofing of the carriage was excellent, so none of the knights outside could hear what was happening in the carriage. Picking up the 3 formation pillars, Lu Qingfeng hastily switched off the little third lamp and kept it close to his body like a precious treasure. Lu Qingfeng slightly lifted up the window curtain, threw a cold glance at the 200 cavalrymen who came with him, then shook his head mockingly. These 200 bodyguards were tall and handsome, and the armors and weapons they were wearing were of the best quality. But this bunch of idiots, all of them were good-for-nothings. Among these 200 bodyguards, none of them had broken through the level of 10 years. Lu Qingfeng, who was at the peak of the Hotian realm, was confident that he could defeat 50 of them at the same time. If he formed the grand white gold dagger formation, he could kill all of them in the blink of an eye. These were the bodyguards sent by his family. Was he going to rely on them to open up a new world in Little Meng City, a desolate place like this? Anger rose up in his heart. Lu Qingfeng suddenly lifted up the curtain and spat on the face of a bodyguard standing next to the window. With an angry voice, he roared, "Get the hell out of here! Get the hell out of here! You blind fool, you're blocking the light of young master, are you looking for death?" The bodyguard was so scared that his face turned pale. He jumped down from his mount, grabbed the reins of his mount and ran away. Although they were the eyesores of the Lu family, Lu Qingfeng still had the right to kill these bodyguards. Even their family members, their relatives, and the lives of all their relatives were in the hands of Lu Qingfeng. Facing an angry Lu Qingfeng, none of these bodyguards dared to say anything. After venting his anger hysterically, Lu Qingfeng clenched his teeth and walked out of the coach. He stood next to the coachman and stared blankly at the 2 giant eagles hovering above his head, motionless and almost hovering in the air. After pondering for a long time, Lu Qingfeng asked with an indifferent tone, "Xiao He, how far away is Little Meng City?" The driver was a muscular man with dark skin and a height of nearly 10 feet. Hearing Lu Qingfeng's question, a gentle smile emerged on this man's ugly face, which was full of scars. He answered respectfully, "Young master, we will reach Little Meng City in 200 miles. With a smile on his face, Lu Qingfeng patted Xiao Hei's strong, rock-like shoulder and said, "Keep going, we have to reach Little Meng City by today." From one of the coaches in front of them, a short and skinny old man with the same dark skin crawled out of the coach while trembling. He carried a bowl of milk in his hand and jumped off the coach, then came before Lu Qingfeng's coach. Raising the bowl of milk in a respectful manner, the old man smiled and said, "Young master, you've stayed up late again, please have a bowl of human medicine." Lu Qingfeng gazed at the gold-plated bowl in disgust, shook his head, took over the bowl, and drank the milk in one gulp. A strong smell of medicine rushed up his throat, and Lu Qingfeng almost threw up. He tried his best to hold back this discomfort, and quietly felt the warm flow of the milk flowing into his stomach. Although this was the human medicine he hated the most, he had to admit, without this human medicine, Lu Qingfeng wouldn't have the energy to complete 3 pillars in a row. Selecting women who were still breastfeeding, forcing them to consume a large amount of all kinds of herbs, then using a secret technique, forcing the essence of these herbs into their mammary glands, secreting it along with their breast milk. This was the so-called human medicine. This kind of nourishing method was very popular among the aristocratic families, as it was the most effective way to remove the harmful ingredients from the herbs. Lu Qingfeng hated this human medicine, but he had no choice but to consume it. If not, he wouldn't be able to complete the pillars, and he wouldn't have the confidence to stay in Little Meng City. Handing the bowl back to the old man, Lu Qingfeng sighed and shook his head. With a low voice, he murmured, "After all, I'm a part of your body, why do you have to treat me like this? Why do you have to put your sins on me? Those bastards, no matter what, I'm still your elder brother from the same mother, why do you have to force me like this?" Before he could finish his words, the 2 eagles in the sky suddenly let out a sharp cry. Suddenly, from a small bush beside the road, came the sound of a wooden clapper. Followed by a series of buzzing noises, 150 crossbows darted out of the woods like a swarm of crazy hornets. The 200 guards of Lu Qingfeng were scared stiff. Over 70 of them were hit by the crossbows, crying out in pain and falling off their horses. 50 men in black, who were wearing tight black clothes, and even their faces were covered with black cloth, leaving only a pair of eyes exposed, holding long blades in their hands, dashed out like a gust of wind. The leader of the men in black pointed at Lu Qingfeng and shouted, "Go, chop off his left hand." When the words "chop off his left hand" entered his ears, a ferocious murderous look appeared on Lu Qingfeng's fair face. Do you really want to force me to do this?" Miserable cries kept coming out. Lu Qingfeng's guards were defeated, and in just 2 seconds, another 30 men were chopped off their horses. The rest of the guards let out a cry of shock, turned their mounts around instinctively, and fled in all directions. Green veins popped up on the back of Lu Qingfeng's hands, and his body was trembling violently. The men in black had arrived in front of him. Chapter 13. Hundreds of villagers from Meng village were driving the carts, and Zhang Hu and the barbarian hunters were protecting them on both sides. The group was moving forward with difficulty on the small path in the woods. 30 carts were filled with the heads of dead barbarians. The pungent smell of blood mixed with the smell of some unknown medicine could make a person faint. In order to prevent the rotting of the heads from spreading the disease, the elders of Meng village had used herbs to refine all the heads, which resulted in this horrible smell. The heads of nearly 2,000 barbarians, according to the bounty offered by the mayor of Little Meng village, this was a huge sum of money. The barbarian hunters and Meng village had reached an agreement. After sending the heads to Little Meng City, the money would be divided equally. This amount of money was more than enough to make up for the loss of Meng village, and it was enough for the barbarian hunters to live a luxurious life in Little Meng City for a few months. Wu Qi was sitting on the shaft of one of the carts, using a dagger to carefully trim the tail of one of the thorns, making it smooth and round. In the animal skin bag next to him, Chi-Chi had placed hundreds of trimmed thorns. The tips of these thorns were shining with a dim light. These were the thorns of a poisonous tree in the depths of Little Meng Mountain, known as the blood seal. These thorns were stronger than iron, extremely sharp, and naturally poisonous. These barbarians loved using these thorns as bows and arrows. Wu Qi had collected hundreds of thorns and trimmed their tails. They could be used as throwing arrows, and they were very powerful. In this world where there were no pistols or firearms, Wu Qi could only use whatever he could find to increase his self-defense ability. Although he had inherited the scroll of stealing, from his conversation with Zhang Hu, he knew that this place was very dangerous. With Wu Qi's current cultivation level, which was equivalent to the peak of the Ho Tian level, he couldn't do whatever he wanted. After fixing the last prickle satisfyingly, Wu Qi carefully inserted it into the beast skin bag, then used a beast tendon to tie up the mouth of the bag. Looking back at the mountains behind him, Wu Qi raised both of his hands and waved forcefully a few times. Goodbye, Meng Village. Wu Qi and his group left Meng Village early in the morning yesterday. The distance from Meng Village to Little Meng City was more than 500 miles. If it were the city guards riding on swift galloping mounts, it would only take them 4 to 6 hours to arrive. However, there were so many big wagons in the group, and they were filled with human heads, as well as the hides and herbs that the villagers of Meng Village were going to bring back to Little Meng City to trade. Naturally, their speed had been slowed down. The muddy road in front of them had come to an end. Everyone had officially walked out of the mountain. Little Meng City was just around 200 miles away from the main road. According to Zhang Hu, Little Meng City had a population of over 200,000, and it was the biggest city within a radius of a few hundred miles. Out of these 200,000 people, only a few tens of thousands were permanent residents. The rest were people like the barbarian hunters led by Zhang Hu. Barbarian hunters, rangers, all kinds of peddlers, even fugitives who killed and escaped, robbers, pickpockets, swindlers, all kinds of scoundrels. Even without Zhang Hu's description, Wu Qi could already imagine what kind of city it was. The men from Meng Village who were leading the group let out a few cheers. The group had finally walked out of the forest and arrived at the main road. The group's speed had become slower and slower. Wu Qi was sitting on the shaft of the wagon, staring at the muddy road that was a foot thick. His face immediately darkened. Is this the official road that connects Little Meng City to other cities? Judging from the condition of this road, Wu Qi was a little disappointed with this place. What kind of damn world had he come to? The villagers and barbarian hunters were used to this kind of road. No matter if they were barefoot or wearing shoes, they would just step on the thick mud and not move forward. Especially those men from Meng Village, they were all tall and strong, and with every step they took, the mud would splash up a few feet high. The color of the mud was strange, and there were some strange things mixed in it, such as dead rats, bugs, and all kinds of strange things. It was hard to tell how many of them there were. Wu Qi's face darkened, and his body was suddenly covered with goosebumps. After absorbing Lu Xiaobai's soul particles and obtaining his insane IQ, Wu Qi had been infected with a slight obsession with cleanliness. Wu Qi shook his head helplessly, forcing himself to concentrate on the mud on the ground. Since he had come to this world, he had to adapt to everything here. If he couldn't even withstand a little bit of mud, how could he survive here? Taking a deep breath, Wu Qi picked up the beast skin bag and jumped off the shaft of the wagon. Together with the men from Meng Village, they walked forward in the mud. The mud had seeped through his crude straw sandals and stained his feet and legs. With a smile on his face, Wu Qi seemed to recall the scene when he was only 11 or 12 years old, when he was fighting and killing ferocious beasts in that muddy fighting pit. Today, what Wu Qi was facing was a new world that was 1,000,000 times more dangerous than those wild beasts, but also 1,000,000 times more exciting. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. While walking, Wu Qi was chatting with the villagers with a smile on his face. The cold energy in the meridians of his arms was getting thicker. He didn't want to waste any time, and he started circulating the technique of the source of water chapter. The water element energies in the surrounding natural energies rushed towards Wu Qi at top speed, passing through his palms and quickly fusing into his meridians. Unlike other cultivation techniques, he didn't need to convert and smelt the energy and turn it into his own cultivation. When the surrounding natural energy entered Wu Qi's body, it immediately became a part of his innate water energy. The scroll of stealing, once it was in his hand, it would become his own. Why would he need to convert and smelt it? With this characteristic, the cultivation speed of the scroll of stealing was at least 10 times faster than any other cultivation technique. Wu Qi could clearly feel his cultivation increasing bit by bit. While he was happily listening to the few men from Meng village bragging about their bravery in hunting at night, he suddenly heard a miserable howl coming from the corner of the main road in front of him. Dozens of magnificent mounts galloped over from the front. Riding on the mounts were tens of knights in luxurious clothes and armors, whose faces were pale. They were howling like stray dogs, running away in a panic, not knowing which way to go. These riders' clothes and armors were slanted. Along the way, some of them were taking off their armors and throwing them on the ground. Some of them even threw their weapons around, trying to lighten their load so that their mounts could run faster. Behind these riders, 7 to 8 men in black were holding crossbows in their hands. They were neither fast nor slow, as if they were shooting targets. They were methodically knocked on the crossbows and shot out the crossbows. In just a blink of an eye, dozens of riders were shot from the back. They screamed and fell from their mounts. When these men fell to the ground, mud splashed all over the place. The crossbows seemed to have been dipped in poison. When these riders fell to the ground, their bodies twitched a few times, and then their faces turned black and they stopped moving. Wu Qi and his company collided head-on with these cavalrymen. Those cavalrymen, who had been frightened out of their wits, screamed and screamed as they rode crazily towards Wu Qi and his company. While they were running, these riders were cursing crazily, "Get lost, a bunch of lowly people, get lost." The few men from Meng village who were leading the group didn't have time to react, and they were hit by the riders in front of them. These mounts were extremely handsome, and the impact was extremely powerful. The few men from Meng village spat out a mouthful of blood and were sent flying for 30 to 40 feet away. A large part of their chests caved in. Obviously, the bones in their chests were broken. Kill them. The villagers of Meng village lived in the forest, and they often fought with the barbarians. Almost every day, they would fight with all kinds of tigers and poisonous insects. They were the most ferocious and barbaric people. Seeing these fleeing riders being so unreasonable, the men from Meng village who were leading the group immediately shouted and pulled out their weapons. Hundreds of men from Meng village pulled out their weapons from Chi-Chi's hands. Their swords and broadswords rushed towards the riders like a tidal wave. Along with a few loud roars, dozens of riders who were running for their lives spat out blood and fell to the ground. Their mounts' limbs were chopped off by the men from Meng village, and they staggered for a few hundred feet before falling to the ground. The riders were chopped into meat pieces by the men from Meng village, and their bodies were thrown into the mud. In just a blink of an eye, all the riders who were running for their lives had died under the blades of the men from Meng village. Just when the men from Meng village raised their weapons and were about to cheer, the men in black who were chasing after these riders were shooting arrows at them from afar. Along with the sound of bowstrings being pulled, more than 20 arrows flew through the air and pierced deep into the bodies of the men from Meng village. The poison from the arrows was so strong that the men from Meng village didn't even have the chance to make a sound. Their bodies trembled and they fell to the ground. It happened so suddenly that the men from Meng village were caught off guard. They stared at the men who had fallen to the ground, and they were stunned. Wu Qi was the first one to react. When the men in black were busy reloading the arrows, he cursed and ran towards those men in black. Wu Qi's running speed wasn't fast, but it wasn't slow either. With just a few leaps, he had arrived at a distance of less than 10 feet from those men in black. Casually, he reached into his beast skin bag and grabbed the few prickles that he had just repaired. Wu Qi casually waved his hand, and the innate water energy in his arm flowed into the prickles. A few faint blue lights shot out and hit the throats of 5 men in black. The 4-feet-long prickles had pierced through the throats of 5 men in black. The men in black stared at Wu Qi in disbelief. Both of their hands were clutching their throats, and they fell to the ground in a daze. The remaining 3 men in black stared at Wu Qi in shock and anger. One of them cursed, "Lowly peasant, you dare to hurt our men." Without saying a word, Wu Qi stepped forward and pulled out one of the prickles. He quickly stabbed them dozens of times. The 3 men in black couldn't see Wu Qi's movements clearly. They only saw a blur in front of their eyes, and a cold wind blew past their bodies. The prickles had pierced through their bodies, and they looked like sieves. "Lowly peasant. How noble are you? If you die, you'll just be a pile of rotten meat." With a sneer, Wu Qi forcefully stomped on the head of the man in black who was cursing. The faint sound of weapons cutting through the air came from the corner of the road in front of him. Wu Qi tilted his head and listened carefully. He frowned, then he ran towards that direction with big strides. Zhang Hu had already rushed up with his men. He grabbed Wu Qi's shoulder and said, "Brother, don't get involved in this kind of muddy water." Zhang Hu's fingertips had already grabbed Wu Qi's shoulder. However, it was as if there was a layer of oil on Wu Qi's shoulder. Zhang Hu's fingertips slipped to the side. Wu Qi turned around and smiled at Zhang Hu. Suddenly, he sped up and dashed forward with a few leaps. Zhang Hu stomped his feet and cursed under his breath. He had no choice but to follow Wu Qi. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.